happened to
see
the
this.
Earth?
You can see the.
We are live. Welcome everyone.
Oh, we're
welcome,
live,
welcome,
guys.
welcome.
No more.
We are
Jack,
live
I'm
with
talking about-
Welcome to Live Guys.
special
I'm talking about
live
time
guys
stuff.
with fries. Live guys with fries. And girl
I
dinner.
want 5 guys.
Straight girl dinner.
Girl dinner.
And
Oh, I need to go
maybe-
get my
and maybe I
chopsticks.
will-
Yeah,
You guys can join the chat, guys. If you're lurking and listening, welcome to the
Yeah, I'm
stream.
down.
Welcome, Simmy. Welcome, Michigan. Splints. Shane. All the people. Thank you for lurking. Thank you for listening. But yeah, I'll be right back. I'm gonna go find chopsticks so I don't get my keyboard all funky.
I was gonna say you got the barbecue one. I got regular.
Yeah, and
No
then
problem.
yeah, I haven't even put on makeup yet because I'm just trolled today. But I'll be back.
Back in time soon. Heck yes to me.
But I'm curious of what would happen if Earth did leave orbit. If like it got out of our orbit, what would happen?
If
Or if
Earth
its
got
orbit
out
were
of our
altered.
orbit, well, we'd still be on
Yeah.
Earth.
Technically,
So that would be
yes.
dangerous.
It would be very dangerous.
It would be very dangerous, and not just.
If we
for
got
us,
away
but for
from the sun,
planets.
you mean? If the sun got out of our orbit, still.
Yeah.
dangerous.
We're orbiting
Yeah,
the
you
sun.
know, Earth
Orbit.
orbits.
Now, if Pluto left, we probably wouldn't even miss dear Pluto. But
Oh no, Pluto
Dude,
already left.
that was my vacation spot until they said it wasn't a planet.
Planet.
yeah, it's
they
a
already left
planetoid.
orbit.
Now it's like I
It
can't
would
get
be-
my
It's
Pluto
the planet.
citizenship,
Survive.
so it's like
Those of us who know, it's a planet.
Yo, Pluto was good enough for your mom, so.
I don't. Yeah, I'm about to say I don't care how small it is. It's a planet to me. Okay.
Like,
I
would
thought
we
it was a
even
dog.
survive if Earth left its orbit? Like,
Earth. Yeah.
We would
Simply
not
put,
survive
no.
very long. We would very quickly hit an ice age that would encompass the entire planet in ice.
Yeah.
Not only that, but everything producing oxygen would die because
Yeah.
it's all fueled by the
Well,
sun.
we could get pretty far away from the sun before that would totally happen, but we would freeze way quicker.
Hockey
Yeah,
will
no
be
fun.
awesome all year round.
Dude, you'd be able to skate the entire globe. It'd be great.
Yeah. I'm gonna go skate to.
I will event
whatever
fire.
continent.
And by that,
what
I
do you
mean, like,
say?
if you survived, how
Does
the heck
anyone
would we?
know?
I'm gonna
if they're
survive, man. I'm
doing
from
tourist
Michigan.
trips
That's
to
I'm a
Mars yet?
survivor!
What was that, Tank?
Survive, but...
Are they doing tourist trips to Mars still, or no?
I got
We
I have
haven't
no
even
idea.
done a single tour. We had no human has set foot on Mars, so tourists,
Maybe-
no.
Maybe
I beg
the
to differ.
moon.
Now, if
I
you
still-
believe Elon, he did say, "Oh, we're getting there last year," so that's cool.
Nah.
Yeah, we're already there. We just don't.
The Mars
haven't
lander
told
was
anybody.
a thing.
No, it's a machine.
Oh my God, I will.
No, we won't get
I
into
know how
that.
to take flight.
If they lurking because boyfriend time.
Boyfriend time.
Aw. Okay, thank you so much for
It's
lurking.
the same
did
way
see
they
Simi
did the
earlier, though.
shot around the moon. They just had to pick up the lander on their way by.
Let's
I
get our
bed rotted until about noon.
Lucky.
Oof.
I didn't intend to bed rot until about noon. I was supposed to get up early and do laundry.
I forgot you were off today,
I
bed
wish
rotting.
you could do what you just did, but I'd never have the time.
Can you hand me the
Hold
scissors?
on, I gotta get my
You
mar.
were-
Do I just come
my
torture
ball
people?
on.
I can talk to people.
I'm gonna win the first marbles race, by the way, guys. Just heads up. Just giving you guys.
Sorry.
a heads up.
Not sorry. Okay.
How dare you
Welcome.
eat?
There you go.
Rigged.
Did I get in this one or did I miss it? Because
I'm sorry, those are not chopsticks. Those are tongs. You
They
went
are
for
tongs.
tongs instead
I
of
know.
chopsticks?
I changed my
Now she's
mind.
trying to eat herself.
They're easier to use.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough.
I mean, if we get shit faced enough, we should not, but
I would
Kitty
take
paw
tongs
tongs.
over chopsticks anyway, especially where hot oil is consumed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
No,
not
I'm
like
having-
hot. Never mind.
Exclamation play though, guys, to get your marble on the track. Exclamation play.
I'm having.
And cheers.
Waxed. and-
Cheers.
You waxed
Oh,
your
I can
balls?
cheers somebody in real life.
oh, you're making me
Yeah.
curious. Okay.
Cheers.
Yeah, I'm having a leftover hot dog.
I'm
French
gonna eat my
fries, and
pork rind real
sour
quick.
cream chip.
I
Yeah,
gotta ask,
Thanksgiving
what
turkey.
exactly do you mean by a leftover hot dog?
The fuck?
Like, you
Good
know,
question.
not that kind of hot dog.
I'm still not
Fishing.
sure what you mean, but that's okay.
I have several questions.
You know, that type of hot dog.
I'm gonna get a beer before I win.
Excuse me, I'm not that type of hot dog.
The old sausage.
Hey, my phone was freaking out and it was still on the start screen till just now. Oh my gosh. Welcome. No worries.
What up?
We're here for some shenanigans. Thank you for playing on the track. I hope you're surviving. Were you off today or did you have to work in craziness? And do you have to work tomorrow? Are you off?
Weekend.
If you missed the shenanigans lately, I did a stream Monday, which was rare.
Mhm.
Marble Monday Madness. And I did a cooking stream Wednesday for
missed it.
cookies.
Whoop whoop, dude.
Ooh. I missed
You're off
that
today
one.
tomorrow? Awesome.
Ooh.
Oatmeal, was it? And are there any left?
Mm-hmm. All right, we have
You got
6
me
marbles on
wanting
the
some
track.
chicharrones.
Right? So good.
Did I win yet? Oh, I
Ah,
win.
the spicy.
I only like the original ones.
I truly miss making
Yeah,
Christmas
fair enough.
cookies. But I'm not much of a baker anymore.
I still love getting the bags, like when you're down in like little Mexican town or whatever. They got like the bags of pinwheels that you fry up.
Oh, the
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, awesome,
You
awesome.
add all your own
26 seconds,
flavorings.
guys. 26 seconds. We can do the
You ever have
fish-
fried donuts from a truck?
I forgot that's a thing.
DJ Horn intensifies. Woo. Oh god, I just heard myself.
We need to reposition that light.
So,
It's not doing its job.
Dead birds.
I guess Stinkbug wants to watch you guys on stream because he's like facing that way, and he's right here on my mouse pad.
it's also
I think
trying
he
to live.
definitely.
So you made friend with a stink bug?
Yeah.
Cool, dude.
Now I can see it on the curtain.
Potato bugs.
Oh,
What?
I
That's
see.
what I tried to do. I was trying to have the little sparkles on the curtain.
Gotcha.
And then I can change the
the
settings, too.
Mm.
Don't know what all it does.
Hey man, they're fine as long as you don't disturb them.
You say
Well,
that.
sometimes
Right in my eye.
It's fine if you're not looking at it, but I don't know. It might give you a headache after a while.
It's all about-
holes are big enough for them to fit inside. And sometimes they'll get up in my fans, and then I'll hear them getting knocked around by the
I'm
fan.
sorry, everyone's having to listen to my
then they
crunching.
smell up the room. Not
We
only
can't
that,
hear
Nope.
it.
It's up. There we go.
I don't like how they all nest en masse behind the wall.
What do you mean?
Yeah, dude. I have Funko Pops behind me.
Did
I
you
picked
do?
up one day 'cause I
I
was moving
made sure
them.
we could see.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
30 of
I
them
forgot to
just
hit
all,
one.
like, hanging
One,
out. I'm like,
two,
holy
two. Oh, it's still
Yeah,
not
I
over
said-
there.
Kind of
Come on, I said
nasty.
I was
No,
gonna win.
no, you were one.
2. There we go. I was trying to do 2 and it
Well,
wouldn't switch.
technically, Joe, this is the second race.
Oh,
This
is it? I lost. What is it?
No. The first race.
That's
It's
the
the
first
first 'cause
one.
it says 1
What
out
you
of
don't
7.
enter.
Don't
No,
let
I
him
can
know.
read 1 out of 7 right there. Grand Prix.
Now that you brought it
can
to
read.
attention, he would have believed me though. Come on.
I don't care how those things.
I
See
don't
how
miss
much of
my
a
mouth
friend
with
he
top
is? He
sticks. With
tries
this,
to
I
lie
miss my
to
mouth.
Because they're not meant to go to your mouth.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, then.
yeah, exactly.
What?
Go gadget splints. Yeah.
Like I said, Kimono, I said I was gonna win, by the way, not you. So.
Mhm.
This will fail.
I don't think you won.
Nope.
Holy,
Listen,
how did Battle Cat shoot forward like that?
I think you got a
Think
world
of what
record too.
axis you using.
Uh-oh.
Does she have
Or a
axis?
stream record because there's a little green dot in the top right corner.
No, that's the
Oh no, what is the green dot?
person that's got it.
Why does it have a green dot? That's so weird.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're right. It says 6 whatever, so I didn't get it. plus
I don't know,
6.
it kind of looks like you have a green dot above you.
I think it's for when you can't legitimately see
Oh.
them. It's a tracking device.
Mm.
You know how many tubes they got in that game.
You're a tube.
All the tubes.
Everyone's a tube.
I'm a tube.
I can't believe it just told me that it was an 18 plus stream.
Don't blow it.
Turned it on a minute ago. Oh, it wasn't
just
on
told
yet.
you?
It should have been.
It just told me. I'm like,
yeah,
it's always
did,
been
did
on.
we say some things?
It's on now.
You all know I can't.
We're pretty.
not cuss,
We're
so
13 PG here, so.
It is says 18 plus next to the title too.
I
mean,
usually
to be
does.
fair, MA14 would have been appropriate too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're not. Okay, we get weird some days, but some days we don't.
We're G, that's what we are. G.
I didn't even know that was a
No,
rating.
this channel is hardly ever G-rated.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're
It's not that
A-rated?
long. I can be
It's
G-rated,
A-rated.
but nobody else can.
nope.
I mean, I could if you demanded it, but you never have.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's
What's the fun in that?
it's, like I said, A-rated, so we all just have to be
Well, I could tell you a lot of things.
If I was strictly a Nintendo streamer playing on the Switch, then yes, I would make it G-rated.
Is anybody else disappointed about
I thought
Metroid
about
Prime?
that. That's a really fun route to go as a streamer, doing Nintendo, because then you get sponsored by Nintendo, you get free gifts by Nintendo, and it's a really cool route to go.
careful.
But then
Only
you
if
can't
you
say
play
anything.
very specific Nintendo games and only ever say Nintendo specific.
It never
Mhm.
talked to us.
Well,
Don't ever
not
talk trash
necessarily
about
true.
Nintendo.
Oh boy.
Not.
How are you supposed to be a critic if you can't?
I know somebody that's supported by Nintendo and does play other games here and there too, but mostly plays
Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
No. What I mean is as long as you don't do it in a
Yeah, you would. I wouldn't say anything negative anyway.
Yeah. You haven't
I
played
just
IOCD
a
didn't like the
Metroid
fact
game,
that it
have
was
you?
different. I had to fix
It
it.
was too different. They practically changed everything about it, including the three basic.
I
things
know
that make
somebody
it
who
Metroid.
plays exclusively Nintendo games, but they do it through an emulator, so Nintendo would never sponsor them. Uh-oh. What's Splint's up to?
Yeah, no, the
Yeah,
family's
Not winning.
happy with
What's
the
up,
big
Mhm.
Sons?
Not winning, yeah, that's true.
Malcat's winning.
I'm winning. Yeah, I'm winning.
I think the only one that actually was good was Air Riders.
Well, catch your Pokemon.
What about Star
On
Fox?
what system are you talking about? SNES?
No.
Oh,
Switch
you're talking
2.
about Kirby at all.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. The original Kirby was pretty good, though.
The original Air Ride was good, but they added a lot of things to it in the sequel, Air Riders.
Yeah, fair enough.
It honestly
haven't
seems
played any
like
of
a
the Kirby
fusion of
games.
Kirby Air Ride and
Hey, I may
Mario
not be
Kart.
first, but I'm still working it out. Look at that.
What about Star Fox?
I haven't seen
That
a
game
release
is
from them
Play
for a
them.
while.
too frustrating to be fun.
Last one I played was Adventures.
Battle Cat somehow is going down on the inside. Like, how does he do that?
He's going down.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea.
It's
Where
going
am I?
down.
That cat goes down.
Where am I?
Somehow you're
Going
in the
down.
center of this weird thing that's keeping me back. Oh, but apparently I cut up to you.
I think I
Look
did that
out.
last time too.
Woo.
I want to catch him eating food.
You passed me.
Nom 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 nom.
Apparently.
He did.
I don't know if that's actually true yet, though.
According to the thing, you did. And you finished first, so. Oh, dear.
Okay, now it's true. But what I'm saying is, on the course, you can never know because the course sometimes has multiple paths that are weird and it doesn't measure properly.
Yeah, true.
Does anybody have a Pac-Man marble?
A Pac-Man
See how long
marble
it takes.
for what, this?
GG
Look at
Splits.
that. Look at my sheep.
I have to say, with as
Yeah.
much stupid stuff as Nintendo has done recently, I still like my Switch 2, right? Hey, I caught the Pokemon.
I'm still baiting on getting one. It's just they're expensive.
I still like my first Switch.
Well, if
The
you
game
want
that
one,
I've
you
been
better get
wanting
it before the
is
price
still
goes up due to
compatible with Switch
RAM
1,
increases.
so.
What I
Yeah.
didn't like about the first Switch.
The game I want that
was
comes out next year is when I'll have to be forced to look at
the
another one.
I won't be
Joy-Cons
buying
to
a
it.
Switch 2.
I bought
Oh, no.
the Switch OLED.
It's
and
like
I've been
$600
happy
and
with
some
it, but I
dollars.
hardly
It's
ever play it.
expensive.
I gotta say,
That's-
I like
that's
the
the same with
magnet
me.
system for the Joy-Cons as opposed to the
Mm.
Rumble.
My friend's getting an OLED from one of their other friends, so I'm
Mhm.
buying her regular Switch one from her.
Everybody I know is like, hey, did you get a Switch 2? I got a Switch 2. And I'm like,
No, I'm about to get
Yo,
a
I'm
Switch
still
one.
on the Wii U.
Switching providers.
nothing wrong with the Wii U.
Mine is white.
I want to
got
go
the
back and
OLED
buy a
one.
Wii U and a balance board and do the yoga stuff and all that stuff again.
I have a
That's
Wii.
okay.
Thing would
Oh,
be
that
cool.
would
It
even
doesn't do us
I
any good.
still-
It's in Ohio, but
I still just
Oh,
want
you
the
do have a
Well, I'm
Wii.
pretty decently close.
Why?
DJ.
I have the Wii controller here.
Controller?
Yeah, the
My
controller
sister
here
has
with the system
my
up there.
original
Mhm.
Wii
I even
at
have-
her,
I bought
You
it.
should have grabbed it while you were up there.
Yeah, it was in
Honestly,
February.
attachment.
Hold on to the controller. Those are harder to find in good working order anyway.
I don't know.
and I even got the board, the workout board thing too.
Oh, the Wii Fit, yeah.
Yeah, for Wii Fit.
Well, you have to
Mhm.
do with it.
Are you gonna sit there and do like?
Wii Fit Resort was fun while it lasted.
YMCA.
I've modded Wii and DS, and they are great to pair with the Switch to play a bunch of different games.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think it's still working. I don't know. I'd have to ask my sister because I don't know if it's still working. Or not.
Get down here.
The only thing is I don't think you can. Can you hook up an HDMI to a Wii, or does it have to be that?
No, you can.
Optic
That's
cable
what
doohickey.
mine had on the
Whoa. Okay. It depends.
Or does
on
it
what
have to
you
be the
need.
color? The color cables.
Depends on
For
what you need.
display purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Display
Like-
cable, that's what they're called.
In order to hook up
Switch
to a
to the,
TV,
They make a
generally
converter?
you need a dock for the Wii. Sorry,
Yeah,
what
but
are you
it's
talking
like-
about?
It's like
The Wii.
HDMI.
The dock.
versus
I'm talking about the Wii. I'm not.
white.
Yeah,
Mhm,
you can
the
use
regular
you
way.
can use HDMI. However, that
Okay.
requires an adapter. Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't come with HDMI out of the box.
It's because we don't have a TV that takes the regular white anymore.
Totally.
If you want,
Yeah,
if
you
you want to
can- you
buy
can
it
use
from
the
me,
other
you can
one.
buy it from me.
Why would I buy it from you? I don't need one. I have one in Ohio. I just have to go visit my family to go get it.
Spliss, do you
To be
have
fair,
one?
you wouldn't catch me in Ohio, so.
That or have them mail it to you.
If I'm gonna
My
buy
family's not gonna mail
an original Wii, I want one
That's
that
what
has the
mine is.
GameCube ports on top, like for the
Mm.
controllers.
Yeah,
That's the only Wii I would purchase.
that's fair.
Yeah.
Not sure what
Serious
Wii one
enough?
I don't know. I'm not sure what.
Laugh all you want, but it is
Can we
what
talk
it
a
is.
minute about how durable GameCube controllers actually were?
I get to
GameCube was a
open it
good
yet?
system. I never
You can
had
open
one.
it.
I heard it was good though.
Open it.
You really wanna open
It
it?
was.
Oh.
I had a lot of fun with
Oh,
it.
before
had
I
a
Cool
open
that I know
it.
what it is.
Why'd it?
Kinda.
Why
Before
did
I
it
open
fall?
it.
You.
GG, Battle Cat,
Because of
BGG.
PlayStation?
Hold on.
Battle Cat
You
one.
open it in a
Now we're waiting on
present.
splits. We're waiting for splits and then we'll open a present.
Oh goodness, I haven't finished yet. Watch out now.
No, you did.
Yeah.
You get forced.
You don't
Why
buy
did-
Wii,
You were last to
so-
finish. You're a gentleman, Splints. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Why did the-
Yeah, that's what she said. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Excellent
just thought we
universe.
didn't
I
even
love
finish it
having the
all.
GameCube controller ports on the Wii. Alright.
why did
Exclamation
the-
play. All the
Yes,
buttons.
Marco,
the-
I agree. You need those.
Yeah.
Like, otherwise, what's the point of
drop
owning a
the
Wii
game.
if
I
you can't
did.
play all the old GameCube games?
Mm.
Did it fail because something came out? a
Let's see
little
what we
after
got.
That was released or
I'm about to
something.
say,
I
yeah,
heard
don't
it
think so.
didn't. Or didn't
No,
fail,
Oh, it's
but
cute
it
paper
like-
too.
Yeah, it is.
By the way.
Let's
It's
not
so
get into that right
cute.
now.
Nah, honestly.
My nightmare before Christmas wrapping paper that I love so much. I finally got to use it. I didn't use it last year.
This is Halloween. This is Halloween.
I know. I put Dalton's gift in a bag last year, so.
It's my colors. What is it?
Did you get her a blow up Hasselhoff though?
So cute.
Mm. I was trying to find one with
Hello,
like an
Kitty
actual Hello
Parts.
Kitty or cinnamon roll,
That's
but
okay. It's got my melody.
yes.
Holy crap!
Yeah,
that
yeah,
Got
Penny
the
Pop.
crow and it's
Yeah.
got
What
kitty
is
cat.
that? Is that like Polly Pocket Funko
Yeah.
Pops?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just like mini
It's been a thing
ones.
for a while now. They're so cute.
One of my Loki Funko Pops is
Dude,
actually
if
one of those little
only,
ones.
all of us knew that
They're
that was the
so
end game,
tiny.
was having Funko Pops that are only the
But
size
tiny.
of a quarter.
Well, this, yeah, right? Because it'll fit better on a shelf versus having 50
Yeah, but you
million
can't see it.
of this size or
Dude, I
this
knew
size.
a dude. His whole
I'm
trailer.
gonna stick with this size for my collection because it takes up less space. So if you send me
Yeah.
Funko Pops, please be the teeny tiny ones.
Itty bitty.
Itty bitty bitty baby ones.
Small as you
I
can get them.
see.
Yes.
Love 'em.
The tiny
Getting
ones.
your
The
keychain.
big ones I have no space for.
I thought it was gonna be a
Unlike me, I
roll-up
make
box.
space
for
mine.
That's what I thought it was gonna be.
Where did I
Yeah,
do
your
with the
whole
other
house
thing?
is.
What other thing?
I saw I had a skitty somewhere.
Oh, no.
Oh, I have it right here.
You got it? You're not skinny, you're Sprigatito?
Sprigatito, yeah. See, I like stuff like this, tiny stuff. That's so cool, and it doesn't take up a lot of space, and I can have a bunch of them.
Chibi.
Yeah. Little tiny Sprigatito. Or
Yeah.
Wait until they
spaghetti.
make half.
Although, don't look behind
Yeah.
Rain when I say I like tiny stuff, because
I'm moving the wrong way. Hold on.
there's
That way.
a giant Sprigatito behind her. Oops. Well, there are some rules that can be broken, but
How many more do you gotta catch? How many more do you have to catch?
All of them.
So
Well,
many
how
of
are
them.
there?
yeah.
Well, pretty soon they're
I
gonna
don't
have
know.
mini minis. Where they're gonna
We're
be
talking
half
about
the size.
Pokemon, like 1,200 and something?
No, there's
300?
1,025.
1,025?
Yep, there's 1,025 of them.
Alright, what
And they're
8-year-old
just
is
gonna keep
supposed to
adding to
remember
it.
that?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember quite a few of the names. You guys should be proud of me.
I don't remember
You
the
were
newer
not
names.
You're right, I'm not.
Honestly, the reason I remember as many names as I do is because of Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
To be fair, like
It's
the
like
first
constant
100 and
memorization.
whatever was almost too much for an 8-year-old. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I have to remember rulings on top of everything else, though.
Oops.
What are you talking like Magic the Gathering rulings or Pokemon
That
rulings?
and Yu-Gi-Oh are my hobbies.
And Yu-Gi-Oh. Oh.
Yu-Gi-Oh. I never got into Yu-Gi-Oh.
I don't
Well,
blame
my
you. It's
Blue
kinda
Eyes
dark.
Dragon says you don't need to remember shit.
Yep, I
Yeah,
have
well-
the Yu-Gi-Oh cards that has the white dragon in it.
I used to have an original Black.
I'm only kidding because I have no idea what that even means.
A lot of the new Mega forms are really cool. Yeah, and Pokemon Go makes you want to collect all the dark forms of everything, all the purified forms of everything, all
Yeah.
the shiny forms of everything, all the mega forms of everything,
Don't
all
forget the
these
Sparklies.
fusions, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, for real. Yu-Gi-Oh has gotten so.
And then all
complex,
the,
it's
whatchamacallit
just
forms,
hard.
the,
You fell for my trap.
I guess that's the megas and the other traps too.
Yeah.
Well, not the gems, but the other things where you collect the.
Whereas Magic
You
the
have
Gathering,
Terra, you have
They release
Mega,
stuff
you
like-
have Dynamax
on
ones.
the regular, it's too much to.
There's all kinds of
I'm
them.
book.
And then you have the Ultra Beasts.
So there's been so many changes in Yu-Gi-Oh over the couple years, yeah.
Oh yeah, they've added like monster cards alone. There are at least like 5
Oh, excuse me.
new different kinds of extra deck monster. Since the
Come on,
original
Seen the new-
release.
Death Battle video. I can't read. Have you seen the new Death Battle videos of Ash versus Yu-Gi-Oh? No, I have not.
Yugi. Yeah, no, I'm not.
Yeah, I don't
You should
watch
post some
that.
in Discord, unless you did and I missed it.
I don't want to watch that.
Come on,
Main reason being is.
Oh god, he is
monsters
here.
Don't have hit points in Yu-Gi-Oh.
What was that?
Who's here?
Come on, oh.
Splints,
Are you
GG.
fucking?
Oh,
are you
he's
joking?
here.
Are you?
I'll post it. Sweet.
Wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
See you later.
Mm.
Come on, are you eating fucking cheesy Watsits? with a
No,
bit of
barbecue
tongs?
with pork rinds.
I'm eating pork rinds. Or
Chicharrones.
Chicharrones.
Or to keep her keyboard clean.
Mm-hmm.
It sticks to her fingers otherwise.
I mean,
I mean,
Just wipe it on. Just wipe it
I'm
on
eating
lady.
pig fat.
Part of
He's-
the,
Yeah,
part
it's
of the
good.
fun is just fucking licking your fingers
Chicharrones.
after. Part of the
Well,
fun is
yeah,
licking your
but
fingers
then-
after you savor that.
What?
Alright,
Then
if you
you
don't
have
like
to
if you
go
don't like
back into the
chicharrones,
bag.
we can't be friends. Everybody here, okay?
I mean, it's keto friendly.
I've never had.
I only like the original ones,
Never
but
had chicharrones, but I
Yeah, I
have
don't know
had
what they're like.
pork scratchings.
It's the
I
same
had
thing.
pork
they're the same thing.
Oh, okay.
They're just called something different here.
I'm
No,
just
it's
the
because
I
raw-
grew up calling them pork
it's the
rinds.
Spanish name.
Yeah.
Chicharrones is Spanish. Okay,
Yeah.
but otherwise it's
No,
cracklins.
hold
It's
on.
cracklins.
Or pork rinds, depending on who you talk to.
Yeah.
Or
The
pork
cracklins
rinds,
you
yeah.
usually
Well,
refer to the ones that have the
well, it's
crispier
with the
edge
top.
on it, the skin edge, which I actually
the
love.
skin
But
edge.
then,
Yeah, the rind.
but I almost the
Take
rind.
me
But
up
then I
to
want to
the
break
skin
my
edge
teeth.
today.
But you know,
Spicy.
I'm alternating between these and Twizzlers.
one minute.
Why would you do this?
Get your marble on the track if you're lurking and listening. I haven't done anything yet.
Or have Twizzlers become less sweet
Twizzler?
than what they started as? Like lately, I've been buying.
There's only a
Twizzlers
couple
that
left.
taste like
Oh my
wax.
gosh,
Oh,
they are good. Twizzlers.
They're so good.
Girl dinner, by the way.
Yeah, we haven't had that.
Silence.
Okay.
Hello.
We're gonna have pizza tomorrow.
Welcome.
I'm excited about the pizza tomorrow.
Play with Rain. Or
Mhm,
Ryan. Ryan, yep.
Lord Ryan is not here right now.
No, he's still in the
I love
closet
the moment
asleep.
that I came in the chat, everyone's just like, oh
You
god.
guys need to be quiet.
What?
Fucking hell, like is that the kind of impression I'm casting?
No,
upon
I'm
you?
I didn't
giving
say
you
that.
Okay.
I know you've been drinking Hush.
You said
I've
everyone.
been-
Well, since when am I everyone? Mm-hmm.
That would dictate otherwise.
And you don't have your camera on.
No,
Yeah, what's up?
No, I don't.
I'm
Those are my
dead.
dreams.
That's mainly
you
because
gotta
it wouldn't
have your
line up
camera
with
on.
my chair.
For those
It was
of
my
you who are
dream
not
to have your
in
camera
voice
on.
chat, I have it on my laptop over here, too, to the left.
You're not cool if you don't have your camera on. You're
My
not part of the
camera is
cool
at
thing.
hip level.
Side
Is
chat
that what it
So
takes?
no.
Mhm.
is with the side chick. No, just kidding.
Got your side chick.
Side chick implies that you have someone else to.
Oh.
No, I'm side chicken. You didn't hear me.
So,
You didn't hear me.
yeah,
I
what
said
does that
side
mean?
chicken.
I'm side
Oh, I
bliss.
didn't get in the race. What the
I
heck?
don't know.
Chicken is the main course. On the side.
That only took about 10
Full
minutes.
catch. What did?
What you sent.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I messed up. And I didn't even poke catch. Wait, I can poke catch.
Hey, I think you missed out on it once.
Nope, I got in.
Oh, did you?
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Someone boot him off.
Mhm.
That's what Splint said.
Oh, yeah, that lady was your main and Momo. Momo was your side chick. You never know.
Wow, unbelievable. Like you're getting your side and your main confused. That's dangerous.
Mhm.
What's real funny is I'm friends with the side chick then.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're more. Yeah,
The
you're more
one in the
main.
center, I think, is
You're
salad.
actually at her house.
Not a secret. So then is it a side chick? Mm-hmm.
Sounds like it's just a poly relationship to me.
Mm-hmm.
Trifecta.
Lost my hat. Eating hazard.
Oh dear.
Can I at least win one race or no?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
No, I want to win at least one race.
Trying
I'm trying really hard right now.
I don't know, but I'll share the park around in the chat. And
Oh my
Just
god.
what about
please,
Ryan?
that looks
Poor
like a
Ryan.
tasty
Oh,
one,
he's
too.
included.
It's huge.
it's actually not that huge though.
That's the main. That's my main.
Well, when you put it right
One.
up to the camera, it looks huge.
Ryan. He lives in the closet.
Yeah, Ryan lives there.
Yeah.
Wonder who lives under
You have
the
to
bed
share
then.
the cookies with Ryan also.
Ryan has to share the chair with Ryan. He doesn't have a chair tonight. She stole it.
Yeah, he's just sitting on the floor in the closet.
Yeah.
Crying.
Mm-hmm.
He stays in there chained up. He's not let out.
Yeah. At least if you give him water.
Don't let me forget to go out to my car and grab my charger.
Yeah.
I meant to grab that on our way back in.
Steal the chair back when you do.
GG Michigan!
I won.
Actually, I might do
I
that
need
now
some
before I
sand
think
there.
about it. Because I forget.
Cookies?
I am
Cookies.
You're just jealous.
Got the cookies.
What? I don't know. Isn't that spelled the same way? I'm so confused.
What are we spelling?
Cookies or cookies? Gassy.
I-E-S?
Haven't smelled anything yet. I'll let you know, Shocky.
Oh, silent is being more adult than we allow on this channel, I think.
Yeah, you're not allowed to be an adult.
Exclamation blade!
Alright, I'll be back
Hey,
in
you
a few.
lost me.
Exclamation play to get your marble on the track. Exclamation play. Welcome, Dream. Welcome to the track. Hee. I've about ate this whole bag. I wonder how many servings it is. Servings are a lie.
Servings. It said about
Servings per container 6. It's a lie. It's 1.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
say
it's
that's
kimono
one
serving.
serving.
It's 1
all
serving.
They are made of cornmeal.
Go and grab my charger.
I was thinking I was gonna be cold outside, and I realized, no, wait a minute, you're in Maine.
Yep. It's extra cold in Maine.
I believe
So
I
much
could
so
take
that I wear a t-shirt
2
outside.
servings, but 6? Hell no. Nobody's ever gonna get 6 servings out of this bag. Maybe 2.
No.
Maybe
Well,
even 3 if you want to
servings are
push
for,
it.
How
like,
many do they
ants.
expect us to eat?
Ant servants.
It says
4.
a half
Yeah.
ounce is a serving.
What kind of
Yeah,
kid is that?
You're using
Like
tongs
I
to
said,
take them
it's-
out back. Yeah, so I don't get the barbecue all over.
Like I said, you can just wipe it
Although
on,
now
later.
my tongs are getting lipstick all over them. So
Uh-oh.
see the lipstick and Cheetos mess. Oh, or barbecue mess.
Right back.
All right, I'm starting the timer. Start. I don't think I posted yet. Yeah. Cheers, guys, if you're lurking listening.
Yeah.
Freaking hair back. With a little toasty in here.
Mm-hmm.
Might have to dip a little earlier. Like 10 o'clock or so. That's about 2 hours.
We're probably gonna dip early too,
Mm-hmm.
cause
We're gonna try at least.
We got a mission to go on. We'll tell you about it later.
Ooh. Mission, you say?
Mm-hmm. It's top secret mission. We can't talk about it on the stream
I'm gonna hazard a guess it's Christmas shopping.
for
I love
safety.
secret mission. Fuck yeah, I'll
Definitely
go for
Christmas
safety.
shopping.
Safety thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a safety thing.
Oh.
Yeah, so we don't talk about it because of safety, to be honest. So we don't talk about it because it's safety things, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you be more vague with its description?
I don't want to give
Well,
away my
then, like,
location for tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
IRL.
Yeah.
That's not a safe thing to do as a streamer, telling people where you're going to be tomorrow.
Well, you don't have to give us.
No.
a
It's an
location,
adventure.
Just
Yeah.
an
as good as we
activity.
get.
No, can't
I'll
do
be
that.
honest with
We're
you.
doing
The
shenanigans.
fact
Dang.
the fact
They'll
that
be
you and
posted
lady have
later.
the fact that you and lady
Shenanigans.
have an adventure planned for
Get
tomorrow,
drunk
like
on
to
homemade
go
eggnog.
on some shenanigans,
What?
fucking incredible.
It would be good.
I can't
I love
it.
imagine what you're doing. That would be so close. And
That's
nowhere
cool.
else.
It's like that's a good way to spend.
Well,
time
it'll
with your
definitely
friends, just
involve
going on
food at some point.
It will.
shenanigans.
I am excited about
What?
the
There's
food.
food. There's
There is food
Okay,
involved.
Guys, we know
Oh,
where
the
it is.
cheese pizza toe orientation.
Did it
Oh,
come with tongs?
Without the toes.
Minus the
I'm sorry,
toes.
I
Minus
don't know
tongs.
anything about that.
Well, that's the best part of this game.
Yeah, I was
We're
gonna say
talking a
pizza
cocktail
lunches.
party.
See, I've
Determined.
gotten like barbecue everywhere. I'm gonna have to vacuum my room.
Oh no.
I gave up on
Whole place
vacuuming
is
a
gonna
long
smell
time
like
ago.
pork rinds.
I don't
You
even
have
own a vacuum
3
cleaner
animals
anymore.
in your house.
We don't have a
Good.
vacuum cleaner. We don't need one. We don't have to fit.
No, you have a dog. That is a vacuum cleaner. But
No, he is so picky about what he eats. It's ridiculous.
I can step in some cheese. Ooh, no thank you.
No.
Yep.
Please don't do
yeah, I
that,
don't
Shocky.
like
That's
cheese
gross.
and feet do not go together.
Location,
Yeah, I
Earth,
don't like
place
that.
where I will be, activity
Okay.
you will see. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, you're
To
on
be
Earth.
seen.
Okay, I got you. Yep. I thought you were on Mars, but Earth. Okay, I got you.
Dates noted.
Yeah, you live Maine. It's gonna be in Maine somewhere with a lot of
Yep.
food.
It's the warmest state in the world. Maine.
It is.
Mhm.
It is.
No, wait a minute.
Honestly,
These are
that
true
doesn't really
facts.
narrow it down very much for me. Because I'm kind of like,
Why would she
States,
need to
great.
send toe pics to me when I'm IRL?
And your toe pics. No.
No.
You can just look down and see my feet.
She also does
Or my paws.
California have
Yeah.
feet.
Okay, I ate it all.
Arizona is probably one of the hottest states, to be honest. Between Arizona and Nevada, they're probably the hottest.
Yeah.
Well,
I thought
I don't
you
like
said
to be that
longest,
hot
like
all
in
year.
length.
Can we-
No,
Some rest.
no, hottest.
Can we
So,
scoop the
see
crumbs in
how-
here?
Yeah,
So here's like
Yeah,
all the stuff-
kinda.
Sorry.
It's probably all stuck to my
Kansas, I
hand.
think.
Let's be real.
might have it beat.
Like I
So
said,
see how-
you didn't have to
It doesn't
use the
count for
tongue, you
everything
could
on the
just use
blanket.
lady to wipe your hands on.
So see
No.
how, and obviously
GG
the States
Shocky.
is massive, right?
Talk about monotos.
But see how
Ooh.
Oh, there's crumbs everywhere. Oh well.
different parts of the states it might be like fucking minus something, it might be like 0,
That's a
it might be like maybe
Tomorrow
+4,
mono problem.
for instance.
Or
Yeah,
next.
I'd be more.
I
I was gonna say that's probably gonna be a
No.
Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
issue.
Not a
Yeah.
problem
Landmark.
in
Yeah.
general.
Sunday
but,
monos problem.
where you're going to is like is it going to be
talking to?
hot? I mean, I think the general.
No, it'll be a lovely
No,
day tomorrow.
it's actually gonna be really nice tomorrow.
Is it just going to be kind of
Yeah,
medium?
it's not like they're going to Australia.
You wanna know what's really funny?
I
Huh.
want
Is
less snow.
Before you and I made plans, apparently I had asked
And
Dalton if we could go to the beach the next time I have a weekend off.
Oh,
God.
poor Dalton.
If you're going to
You
go to
could
the
have
beach,
canceled.
I did ask, but he wasn't off today. He had to work
Oh,
today and
okay.
tomorrow.
So he had to work anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, but exclamation play, guys, to get your marble on the track. Exclamation play.
I tried to plan a lunch date with
I
him.
already have my marble out there, sorry.
Well, you are doing
no
it.
circumstance today does someone pick 11.
Yes.
I will.
Pick 11,
Nope.
everyone.
Everyone pick
It's
11.
not.
Alright.
I'm pretty sure
It's
this
too late. I already picked
I-
13.
I'm
It's
pretty
fair. That's a good
sure
number,
I'm
too.
fucking
11,
I'm
just
pretty
said-
sure
The
this
thing
is
is,
like
it
a
doesn't
method of
work.
encouragement.
It doesn't work unless
Maybe
you're a
it's just,
subscriber anyway.
It's
Yeah.
reverse
Come again?
psychology.
Do you use your
No,
Prime?
you don't get
sub?
to pick your ball unless you sub.
Yeah, not
Yeah,
in the
because
right hand
that's a
column. You
script.
can't
Yeah.
be 11
Alright,
unless
I'm
you're a sub.
subbed. I'm
No.
subbed.
There you go.
Not for
Oh,
this.
fucking
You don't have the badge.
Nope, your text would be blue.
Previously
I
subbed for
guarantee
16
you-
months.
I
You are not
guarantee you
currently
I'm
subbed. You
It
are not subbed.
expired.
I can look at it right here, my guy. You
It
are not currently subbed.
Expired.
So
You need to
then in
fix
that.
that.
Case, I
Splints is
apologize.
fixing it.
I apologize. Nah, you don't fucking do that to
Don't
me.
ever feel like you have to sub, guys. We're just
No.
giving dreams a hard time.
You
Yes.
do not fucking do that to me. I have. This is free for me.
Deal with
You
it.
don't do that to me.
It's my
Totally.
island.
I
And it's
didn't-
fucking my decision.
Deal with it.
It's my island.
No, you don't do that to me.
Deal
Maybe
with
when
it.
it runs out.
Thank you, Splits.
Nah.
The notification
Nah,
didn't
I'm
go
not
off that I
I'm
got a
not
sub or whatever.
It did.
Did
It
it?
was
No,
just really
because you
loud
don't-
and you ignored
Do you
it.
know why? Do you know why? Do you know why I don't? Do you know why I don't want?
And I ignored it. It sounds about right.
You know why I don't want him to do this? Because he's gonna win. He's gonna be on the fucking podium, and we all
Does
know
he pay for it?
through fucking so
Yeah,
many
pay
times.
to
I've
I
won
won
this
before
game.
that, don't worry.
Why does
Don't
this
worry
course
about
have to be pink? Sorry, that's just.
Oh, I've got hiccups. Yeah, I mean, with the nodules and everything, it's a little weird.
Yeah, why is that?
I mean, you could always pass it forward, Dreams, unless it was Prime sub.
It's
I mean, I wish you
literally
could
gonna be a
pass your
prime
Prime sub forward.
I wish I could, but
Also, I
When
wish
I-
you could set Prime to be automatic. Like, why do I have
Right?
to remember?
When I look on Discord, it says
Kimono, see my
resub.
notification from the very start of the stream.
It says resub.
Mm.
That's
Yeah,
pretty much
you
all it
sub.
says.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
That's it. That's all. That wasn't me, because I've still got my resub. That was someone else.
Before I even started.
No, it was.
Oh no! Yeah, I
was
gifted. You're welcome.
Yeah, I don't think I
Yeah.
can.
Nigo,
like,
Nigo,
fucking you don't do
Nigo.
that.
Thank you guys.
We better not
just-
let
well,
me
now
miss
you
D&D.
can spend
It's a
it on
big
some
fight
other
apparently.
Okay, we won't let you
No.
sit.
Wow.
My sweet murder
Is that
baby
how
has
it
to
goes?
cast some fireballs.
Murder baby.
Yep, my
So,
sweet
no,
little
like,
raven.
I gave
She's
it,
a sweet little
and then
kinkoon.
you let me sub, or you subbed me twice. So it was a
No,
waste
I
of your
subbed
money.
you. I subbed you right before it.
Come on, Michigan. You
Mhm,
know
mhm.
how to work these. Sorry, that was weird.
Oh, how long
God.
does
Yeah, I wanted to get
So
it
if-
done before
Wait. If
possibly
anything,
pasted
Aiden,
out in Mr. Stream. Oh, passed out in Mr. Stream. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
If you
Did someone
manage
say
to
Fireball?
Use your
Oh
Amazon
gosh, are you
Prime.
drinking Fireball?
Fireball.
Cheers.
better pair it with some?
Mine's
I
like
haven't
getting
had a
low.
Brown
Fireball
apple,
since
green apple.
when I was at the bar.
Mine's
a long
empty,
time ago.
which
Dude,
is why I've been
honestly,
sipping
Fireball's
on.
gross. It's not even whiskey. It's
water
like
and
propylene
soda.
glycol and
Yeah.
cinnamon flavoring.
Yeah. I don't.
Have water,
Normally
too.
people buy that because it's
Gross,
cheap.
water.
Like, hey, roundabout.
Literally
round-
sugary
round-
aniseed. However,
Yes, but not the
It's
fireball
not
you're
even
thinking of,
whiskey.
Shocky.
if I'm out playing golf,
I stick with beer.
because it's just such a
I'm still so mad
Baby
about my
shark.
streak.
Do 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 do.
I'm still so upset about my streak.
because it's such
I
a
lost
Yeah,
it to the
you're like-
Monday.
short
I'm
salt.
pretty sure.
I
Silent
really
Rogue is
felt
on
bad.
about
I felt like I'd be
Phenomena.
harassing you if I messaged you, and I
You
should
should've.
her.
You should
But
have.
she's gonna get mad at me for bothering her.
Oh no,
Not
it is.
get
dude,
mad at
dude,
you.
dude, dude.
I would think you like passed out and had a bad day and just wanted to be
Yeah,
left
no.
alone.
No, I had a rough day, but I was just distracted with making the fluff. We made a little fluff.
Oh, that comes after the fireball song.
Wow.
Sorry, I should give context. I think most of you guys know, at least those of you who are in Discord, know that I've been binging the crap out of Final Fantasy XIV. I have created a second character, and he's a bun boy. And with like 4 other friends, we have created what's called the
Oh,
Fluffle,
boy.
because a group of bunnies is called a Fluffle, and so we are all playing bunnies.
And when they,
Aww.
when do they become a kerfluffle?
Ooh, Poketch.
When we have too many.
So anything that can rot wood
I
and
will
rust
say-
metal can't be good for the body. Very true. Game over, Grant.
All right.
Welcome back.
That's not true.
Don't talk
Maybe
shit
I
about my
will
Playing
coke. I don't have a choice.
music
It's the
as
one.
my bard. Nice.
I will
Welcome,
say it sounds very
welcome.
sweet.
I
What
sit
you
on
do
a
with
board
your
and
friends
we
sounds
fart
very
on
no,
Gridania
no.
all the time.
However,
Oh
What the fuck?
goodness.
To be
Hey,
fair,
how are
oxygen
you?
can
We're doing
rust
good. We're doing
metal
good.
and
Alright, we're
do
gonna
all
finish
the
this
other
Grand Prix
things,
real quick. And then we'll go on to the next.
I'm
Third
just
place
saying,
goes to
oxygen.
Let me
Mr.
guess.
Splints and the
Feisty.
cute beep
Yeah.
beep sheep.
Third place.
Then we
know
have Michigan. Oh my
Second.
gosh, what's incoming?
I'm the
Hi,
second.
Where'd
I'm the
it come
first
from?
loser. That means I won.
That's crazy.
Michigan
Oh,
with
yeah.
second
Am I there?
place.
Am I there?
Second loser.
No, I
First
guess.
place goes to Shocky. I'm shocked.
Oh,
I'm
that's
shocked.
very shocking. Yeah.
I think
I'm
that
very
hype train's
shocking.
like really far behind.
There we go.
Like it appeared out of nowhere.
Server is that?
You get
Hmm?
first purse. First purse.
Oh,
Don't
don't worry
I'll
about me.
take
If you
that.
get first place, you have to get a drug test. It's a requirement.
And
I got the freaking
But-
Pokemon.
it's you. Okay, none of these are
I'm proud of you.
ridiculously long, are they? Okay.
I got a
Play.
Zangoose.
I
Exclamation
don't know. That's
blade.
what. That's
I'm
what she
gonna
said.
vacate for a moment.
Exclamation play.
Exclamation.
Yes. Welcome everyone. Welcome to the stream. And here is
Yes.
my special
Yes.
guest, Lady Ray,
Yeah, she is
visiting
pretty
today,
special.
hanging
Welcome,
out.
welcome, lady.
Yes,
Yeah.
because you don't see me all the time, Dreams. You just don't see me here.
I can't remember the last
Oh,
time
yeah.
I
I was
ever
about to
saw
say,
you.
I see you.
Special play, guys. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Get your marble on the
So to
track.
me,
1
you're
minute on the
not
clock.
much as special. But
It occurs to me I have been.
I think I'm on Leviathan, but a server hop all the time.
I don't remember which data center that's at.
Well, you all have a lovely one. I'm going to sleep. Sleep well, Silent.
take care.
Sleep well.
That might just be its own data center. I don't even know. We're lucky I know the 2 servers I live on.
20 seconds.
Eat it, don't stop.
Alert. Give all the hugs. Thanks for hugs, Silent. Rest up.
Oh, you're
We've
just on a
got the
different data
marbles in
center.
the hype cover.
You're still okay. Yeah, my main is home of Marlboro, but she's usually on Diabolos, and then my alt is usually on Kraken because that's where we made him. Well, technically I made him on Marlboro. Server transferred him.
Ooh, extra marble times 2,000. I hope it works. I hope it helps. Looks like Shane's got his mod hacks on though. You know, he's in first place.
Shane's hacking.
Mods
Yeah.
get
I
dips.
got my hack from him.
Although it
actually,
looks like he
so-
went the wrong way, so maybe not. Maybe not.
It doesn't work,
Maybe I
but I'm
did
gonna
get
try
my
it
hack
anyway.
from him.
Looks like he went the wrong way. He has to turn around and try again.
That's what
Maybe I
happens when
didn't
you
get
try
my
to
hacks.
jump in golf.
Or maybe not. Maybe he went through a portal. I don't know what just happened.
I think it was a portal.
Now we're like behind a
It's very
wall, so I can't see
complicated. I just want
nothing.
to
That's weird.
finish.
This is really slow. They have no boost, nothing.
We need some boost.
I've got to get to bed.
Yeah,
at some point,
exactly,
and my
boost.
butt's falling
They're
asleep.
crawling. All right. Good night, man.
It's so we
Good
can
night.
have like conversations. That's why
Portal.
it's so slow.
Jump.
Wish I could stay,
Ooh.
really.
Over the water. I don't think I've seen this one. Maybe I have. Maybe I haven't. Actually, I hadn't.
Yeah,
I was
it is
playing
slow.
different tracks. I hadn't played yet.
You see me
I mean,
slow?
no rush when you're on the green, right?
Well, yeah.
So here.
Unless you
I don't
have
want
a
to talk about
party of
green right
5
now when
behind
all
you
I
and you're
see
holding
is
them up.
white.
Nah, man.
I want to go golfing, but like I said, it's white outside, so it's kind of hard.
Just
Uh oh, Ryan's doing all the typing. Beware. I'm pretty sure it's going
Like-
right over to game over. Grant, beware. She's typing a lot.
I have so many innuendos that it's not even.
Is
I
it
don't even-
innuendo?
I really don't want to get cancelled.
Her fingers are like she's got on her laptop right now.
A little bit.
She's typing a novel.
Mhm.
You mentioned Final Fantasy, so that's it.
Yeah, I'm like,
That's gonna be the whole conversation the rest of the night.
I'll fight. No, never mind.
She is replying to all the toe pics. Oh my gosh.
The fuck?
See? All right. I'm supposed to do all the software.
I do those.
That's
I do those.
GG, Michigan,
Do.
dreams and shame.
Oh, I won. See, like I said,
Fuck, I
children.
came second.
I don't know.
My guy.
Don't be upset about that. That's better than being first.
Spearman last, man. I'll take that.
Yeah. No, you're the first loser. That means
See,
you
it is
won
a
on
golf
your own.
course. Look at that.
Hey, I'm the first.
Yeah,
to
I was
lose.
second to
I'll
last,
take it.
so I was still a gentleman. Just not.
Ah, nice.
I
You're
was
gonna
a-
have whatever type of class you need
I
at
used,
the end.
I used my
Let's go. Fantasy chasing base.
I guess the kimono.
Get your
works.
marble on the track. What'd you say? What'd you say, Michigan?
No, I said I used your marble last one, so
Oh,
it worked. So
okay.
I'm gonna use it
That was a
again.
good look. I'm gonna hide. I really like
I
it.
can see
just
how
we're
that would
hiding
be
under a blanket.
confusing.
Yeah, we're gonna call it. We're gonna change the title to "Sleep." Oh, I'm just sleeping, and Rain's gonna
Oh,
be the
God.
mod RL while I sleep. So
Yeah, okay.
Only
Because that's a good
narcolepsy.
idea. That's a real good idea.
Should be playing Final Fantasy and not paying attention to chat, so.
If I could easily download it while streaming and then continue to just stream on Final Fantasy with your channel, I would. I do already have it downloaded on my laptop, but it does not run very well on my laptop. It used to when they didn't have Endwalker and Dog Trail.
Hitting start.
Runs
Start
awful
would
now.
be good. You have 60 seconds on the clock.
Oh, I did. Okay, I'm in there. I'm just hidden behind the announcement.
Yeah, you're hiding.
You're in there. You're just hiding. Yep.
You're in there. You're just hiding. All right, marble inspection time. We have Michigan with the KimonoKat marble. We have Gamer.
Game over, Grant.
Oh, with a corn
It's a
on the
corn.
cob ham. Cute.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then we have an 8-ball for Battle Cat. And we have me with the KimonoKat skin.
Roast.
I should change my skin. Not my skin, but my, like, decorations.
Whoa.
There's Lane, right?
Just
Lane?
de-sheath.
No,
de-sheath
Michigan! Why are you sending feed pics?
Michigan sent me toes.
Oh yeah, I did.
Toe beans.
yourself.
Minus the beans.
Yeah, I don't want to send no beans.
No beans.
No beans.
How's Miss Lucky?
She's passed out behind me, so she's.
No.
She ain't got no pizza toes.
I forget to look.
She's
Beep.
just passed out.
Come on.
They're circling. No, they're not. They're way down here.
Zoom in.
Oh, jeez.
Zoom in.
It looked like they were circling.
No.
Zoom in.
Oh, fucking.
What do you mean?
Get
Zoom
there.
out.
Okay.
Zoom in. Zoom out.
People
Okay.
need to stop
I'm gonna-
messaging
Oh, okay.
me.
He's on this thing.
I've been done with work 3 hours ago, and they're
on,
still messaging
Come
me.
on, motherfucker.
Well, stop it.
Put your phone.
No,
away.
stop working.
But my friends message me on the same phone.
Stop working.
I'm not working.
You need a whole separate phone for work.
Why did
All
he
your
cop
friends
cars,
are
man?
here right now. No, I'm just kidding.
Every single one.
No, I think the friend is me.
Yes.
What, your friend? I thought she just likes random people.
The
Or
friend was me. I don't know.
Doesn't really matter.
Come on, let's win again.
Win again.
Only thing I do is win, win, win.
Dude, I'm killing it right now, to be honest.
Almost has night. He's going to sleep.
Oh, I was.
See, when you win so much, does it not get boring?
Oh
Way to
yeah,
get
it
on
just
my way.
takes skill.
Lady, get out my way.
Mm-mm.
She won.
Absolutely not.
Who lives
This
in a
is-
pineapple
this
is
floating
hacked.
in
No,
space?
just go home.
You're a mod.
Missed
You
your
Absolutely.
can't
in
just say you
space
cheated.
Yep.
pants.
You cheated.
Wow.
Because you're a
My
mod.
poor
So
husband.
that means you
That
automatically
was,
cheated.
that was tough. To learn.
Where's the Wiggles? Wiggle, 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 wiggle.
I don't know,
Uh,
actually.
Dreams
Is
leveled up to
Wiggles
4.
is
5?
Sylvan-
I don't
Missed
think
it
it's-
the
is-
jiggling.
It was Wiggles' wife.
I haven't actually heard
birthday
from
today.
him today.
Look at me. Oh shit, I made a record time.
Oh, it
Look
is.
at you.
It is somebody's birthday
Shit.
today. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah.
We're gonna take a
Oh,
picture of
She
that.
did cheat. I told you.
It's,
She
it's-
did.
It's Tina's birthday
I
today,
told
you. Uh-oh.
so they've got a hotel. They've
There.
got family come round. They're away. They're not going to be here, I would imagine.
Yes.
Oh
Right.
yeah, it's her
Yeah, that's
birthday. But
true.
they said they might stop in for her birthday and say hi.
Yeah, yeah.
Who?
Oh yeah,
she
and
might.
maybe that would be.
Oh
cool
yeah.
If that happened.
Mrs. Wiggles.
Mrs. Wiggles
Mate, you
might be live
you
on
showed me the
stream, not
hotel.
stream, but live on
Discord.
Discord.
You
Discord.
showed me the
forgot
hotel
about
that
that,
his friend
actually, yeah.
booked. and I
Exclamation
swear
play,
to
guys!
God, mate,
Exclamation play!
This is nice.
It is like fucking god tier. Like there's one room and it's
Jeez.
like got a fucking ensuite bathroom. It looks really picturesque. There's like a
Hurry,
kitchen
hurry,
dining
hurry!
room,
Exclamation play!
and then there's like another room. It's
1
like
minute.
the size of that penthouse suite, is fucking double the size of my house off the flat. It's incredible.
Well,
So,
That's
hence
cool.
why it's a penthouse.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know if it's a penthouse because he didn't tell me, but it certainly looked like it. Looks phenomenal. And so he's
26
celebrating with his wife
seconds.
tonight.
Plastered. Exclamation plastered. What?
What? Who's getting
Are
plastered?
you? Are you? Not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, yeah, whatever, sorry.
Oh, he's choking. You okay,
Oh
man?
yeah, artist is here, so we
Yeah,
can-
Uh-oh,
artist
time
is
to
here.
end.
It's time to shut down the
Ah!
stream.
take care. That was a good stream. It was. It was.
Run away. All right. Good luck, all.
Uh-oh.
I don't need luck. I win.
Run away. Nope. I hit the thingy. Let's go.
I have a little bit.
Exclamation number reaction. The other night, I almost made it back before you ended.
Exclamation number
Oh,
redaction.
marbles on
Huh?
Monday.
Artist is here, so we got to do our snack
I take my number
measurements.
back. Yep, I take my number back.
Snacks.
If you don't have a Twizzler that's at least half a knee.
Well, we don't have any Twizzlers left. Also, I was
I'm
at
about to say, you
Target
ate, like,
and they had giant
28,000 pounds.
Twizzlers. Like this long.
Actually long ones, not
Yes.
like fake ones.
Yeah.
We don't need no fake Twizzler.
Well, it's like you buy the long Twix, and it's not really. It's just a bunch of Twix.
Yeah,
and
no,
then-
it was like an actual like long Twizzler.
Yeah, it's just a long box. Artist is 46% a snack. Not true. Those are lies.
I'm risking it again.
All lies.
Artist is absolutely a better snack.
Oh no!
That's even a lie. I'm sorry.
I went from like what was it last time? 96 to 1.
Yeah, to 1.
Ouch.
It's a lie.
I did end up getting artist artwork finally.
Did you?
She finally sent me the one that I paid for.
That's so cool.
Along with Pokemon cards I bought over a year ago. Unfortunately, I did not get any good hits.
How long did that take? Was it more than a year?
85% of snack. Shane's winning. Shane's winning.
I did finally send you. I swear to God, I sent it to you.
GG.
It took a year and a month.
See,
Oh.
GG. Look at the points. Michigan cat artist.
But to be fair, the
Classic
Pokemon cards
rolling
got left
down.
in her car.
That is a
Like
complete
February of
fucking
last
lie.
year.
Alright.
When I
Station
got my
play. Also,
When I got
a lot
my Game
for
Boy, it
those.
was easily 2
oh, I
years.
don't own any
It was
balls. I
not
don't have
two,
any
it was
balls.
only
That's not
one.
true. It's a lie.
But you had all the balls.
I feel like I do. Sometimes.
I did not get any good hits on those Pokemon cards. Kind of unfortunate. Did over a year for those Pokemon cards and got enough.
I don't have your address
I
saved.
didn't have my address saved. That's okay.
Exclamation
I
play,
swear to
guys.
God, it was somewhere. I have no idea what happened to it.
44 seconds on the clock. Let's go. Don't get left behind.
I don't want cheesecake.
Go get the cheesecake. Do you know where the plates are? Paper plates?
I can just go dig around in the kitchen.
Yeah,
that's
they're
fine.
on the cupboard. next
dangerous.
to the-
The right of the sink.
Okay.
Yeah, right there. That's where it was.
If they're not hanging out with the cheesecake, what's going on here?
Ain't no cheese in the cheesecake, man.
Oh, my security just detected motion in my house.
Whoa.
Oh, wonder who that is.
Oh,
Call the police.
Do you know how fucking weird I am right
There's
now?
a Ryan in my house.
It's
Yeah,
pissing
and
down.
she said she was Lady Rain, but there's a Ryan. Like, I'm confused.
Yeah.
You know how
Call the
fucking
police.
weird I am right now. It's pissing down outside. It's like fucking minus.
So dark.
Actually, it's like maybe
There.
like fucking 4 degrees or something short of that. Really, really cold outside. Certainly with the chill factor. And I'm sitting here eating fucking
Oh, Joe
Joe
Factor.
Jerry's.
Splints and Lady caught it, but I didn't.
Oh, there's a. I have to. Sorry, I have to do this.
You know what messes with me about Pokecatch is that like I typically just use the regular Pokeballs. And I'm not like a high level player, so why am I catching all these Pokemon? Shouldn't I be required to use a higher ball? Or am I just really lucky? Nah.
Required to use a higher ball to catch Pokemon? What? I'm sorry. Not necessarily.
I'm just saying, like, why do I catch so many Pokemon with regular balls when people
like
are throwing,
random.
like Ultra Ball?
Why does it look like only like a couple of them are lit up? But yeah, it depends on how bad you want the Pokemon. You can do Ultra Balls if you want it like higher catch rate.
Well, but what I'm trying to say is apparently because I don't tend to want them too much, I catch them all the time.
Michigan, that's terrible.
What?
He said pizza toes.
Oh, is that how I catch them? I use my
it's
pizza
not
toes?
just mine.
Yeah. I know, Miss Lucky's pizza toes.
Oh, the pizza beans.
Yeah, Rain's gonna
I
like
took
that.
picture like a year ago or something. I was like, wait a minute, I do got a foot picture.
No feet.
You're not wrong. The ones that look like they're turned off are the blue and red ones because your shirt's red.
Probably. Probably what it is.
Yeah.
That and it's kind of bright. Here.
No, the rest of them look like they're on still, but
the red ones are just dimmer too.
They look so dim compared to your red shirt.
They are just that dim too.
On. Yeah, even though they are.
They're not really that that bright.
So I remembered that
GG's.
I forgot to relock my car.
Oh, it's a good thing you left
it. I'm out.
Now.
Yeah.
Well, gall dang, I'm stealing all the points. Did I get first? Maybe.
Hey,
oh, this is the one I don't like. Can we get this one?
Nope. We gotta do it.
I think we all die.
Creepy castle.
We might.
Maybe this isn't the one I'm thinking of. We'll find out. We'll find out.
This is the one where it literally just throws everybody off the level. Nobody can ever finish.
And here we have a Rain eating cheesecake.
Yep.
In IRL.
Wiggle dance.
Mm-hmm.
Good food.
It's good. It's good cheesecake.
Cheesecake?
I got a small one, so.
That's
this is the fourth of a cheesecake.
It sure is.
I was about to say, that's a small cheesecake? What?
Mm-hmm.
That's a fourth of one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's a cheesecake.
Fucking hell yeah. What's the vanilla? What's the cheesecake? Vanilla?
It's just regular cheesecake. I don't like toppings on
vanilla, creamy, and it's got sugar and a graham cracker crust.
Are we watching a
Oh, I'd fuck with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really thick and cheesy. It's like cream cheese. It's like a cream cheesecake. I don't know. Do y'all have cheesecake?
Come again?
Do you have cheesecake? Well, if you do that, then.
Yeah, we have cheesecake.
You have cheesecake?
Okay.
Yeah. And, like, chocolate cheesecake.
It might help if they could see them. Oh, I see.
My fucking god, it's like.
I forget that it's there.
Yeah, it's before.
I usually have to yell at you for having you. Big you.
Yeah.
A chocolate cheesecake.
This game is
like,
more chill. You don't have to catch every moment, so.
Well, you don't? I want to see my.
I'm sorry. Okay, I was switching it back so you could see your balls.
Gosh, man. Like,
Jeez.
I thought you were a
make sure our balls touch.
I'm just
Thank you for holding the mirror up. I really
I want to
that.
see my balls.
Without
in action.
I will.
Well, in action. That's
without doubt,
weirder.
I will fucking annihilate a full fucking pie of cheesecake.
Is it really a pie if it's...
Did you see what he sent?
Well, I mean, you get
Michigan?
a fucking pizza pie. So, is that
me
a
and
pie?
me and my cat are going places.
The pizza pie is a pie because it has a crust.
I took that like
underneath
a year ago.
And
but
what
I was
do
like,
you
wait a
have?
minute, I do gotta.
And what do you have in a cheesecake?
Yeah.
You get the crust on the outside, so it's still a pie.
Oi.
Anyway, yeah, I'll fuck with that. Bit of chocolate on it, or a bit
Those
of
giant
raspberry,
Morbies.
bit of raspberry or blueberry in the middle. Fuck.
Those are good too.
Oofed.
Wow, they're smoking like mad fucking bongs or something. What's going on with that?
Mm-hmm.
Come on, Michigan.
Dang, Battlecat's got quite a lead. Oh, he's ahead of the
Meanwhile-
track record right now.
Well, nobody knows.
Well-
Oh, no, he got
It's
stuck.
over.
I was gonna say, if he keeps it up, he's gonna beat the world record, but no, he got stuck.
Wants me to win.
He got stuck, so he's not gonna get a world record.
Dang.
I got
I
stuck
want
too.
me to win.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I want
assume
me to
I'm-
win.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I got stuck.
And I'm stuck in the corner.
But did you get
Stupid
stuck
corner.
at Bucky's? Did you have a breakfast sandwich?
I want to
Yeah.
go back. I want to go back to the
Is
south.
that bad getting stuck at Bucky's? I mean, you can almost live there.
Hey guys, I won.
I'm gonna live
Um,
at Bucky's.
Back to Bucky's.
I'm going to go to
I
Bucky's.
wasn't paying attention on
I'm gonna
Marvel's.
live
I just held
at
the
Buc-ee's.
W button down. My character was running
On
in
the
a
roof.
wall.
If I was
It's
ever in the States, I don't think you'd find me outside anywhere that sells
Catch me
lobster
outside. Catch me outside.
or, you know, like the fucking hell.
No, we don't, unless you can describe it.
Yeah, it's a state.
Uh,
Oh, it's a place in the States.
Hmm?
Sells a lot of seafood.
He's Link.
And right on the shore.
Classic retro
it's like,
adventure.
hey,
Definitely Link.
it's really like fucking New York. Like I'm walking here. It's like fucking. It's got that.
Oh, artist is
that
playing.
twang.
Artist is gonna win now.
Fuck.
Calling
Seattle.
it.
Nugs. Oh,
Dude.
Southern Honey Barbecue Nugs.
Exclamation
Yeah,
play, guys!
yeah,
Exclamation
yeah.
I was
play
like,
to get
I
your
said-
Marvel track.
I was so
Hey.
confused because I thought Nugs was here, and I'm like, wait.
Don't forget to copy paste.
If I was to ever
G3's
stay
playing
somewhere,
I
marbles?
want the barbecue
I think-
bugs.
I
They're a
think
little
it
bit better.
would be Seattle because you got so much good seafood there, man. Like
Dreams,
really,
paste,
really good fresh seafood.
pasta, copy pasta.
Get
You
in
need
the
to
game.
play something.
He's gonna be upset if he misses it.
You gotta play to win.
You have to play to win.
You can't
There
win
you go.
if you don't play, but you can't lose if you
And he's
don't
now
play.
blue.
Thanks, Sweet
It's
Pea.
the other way too.
Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. You're blue
The
thanks to
autism is
Splints.
right
He
now.
was it Splints?
Blue,
Yeah, Splints gifted
blue.
you that sub. So you're blue.
So you can actually use the one that he keeps trying to use.
Mhm.
At least you're not green.
I used it.
You got boosted
You
luck.
just fucking doubled over.
Well, you extended it then. Don't worry,
Yeah.
you'll have it next month as well then.
Yep.
Well, you have to do it this way. The double.
All works out.
Oh, the double like that.
Doubled
Oh
over.
my gosh. Let's not even get started on that again. Oh my
Go ahead.
god. I don't think Rain
I can
was
actually-
around for the
No,
end of that
no.
You know,
other
you
night.
see
Thank
I
them-
can
God.
actually do it
Mhm.
now because we all. just
Yeah.
Practice so much, you're like, fuck yeah, I can
No, I
do
didn't
it."
practice. Also, I could just do it. I don't know why, but yeah,
Your hands were like, oh, okay, that's how it works.
yeah. My hands are like.
Oh my goodness.
do it.
Kids these days.
I like to.
Kids
do it.
these days.
Hey, who you calling a kid? I'm not a kid.
Yeah.
What?
You're a kid, kid.
What up, there, kid?
Some people's kids.
Well, yeah, it is somebody. Yeah, I am somebody's kid.
That is
but,
literally a fucking saying I use on a day-to-day basis.
I mean, to be fair, you wouldn't be
Some
here if
people-
you weren't a kid at some point.
I'm about to say you wouldn't be here if.
The telling
Yeah,
all
you're
the
definitely
guys-
somebody's kid.
Some people's children. That's the
I wouldn't be
terminology I
here.
use.
if
Not
my
mine,
parents
though.
didn't get
No, I was a spontaneous creation of the universe.
married.
My
I'm
children
the
have
Big
birth.
Bang Theory. I'm the
That's what
Big
you're
Bang
saying,
Theory.
you're a
actually.
mistake.
What is-
Oh, I'm so full. All I've done is eat today.
Go,
It's been great.
Not me.
Plants.
No,
She's full.
Oh.
I didn't eat until I had. I think it was 1 o'clock. I ate.
Hey, I won.
I'll be honest with you, I'm borderline.
I've been
finished
eating
with
since
fucking
9 o'clock.
berries.
Oh,
I will
maybe
say-
9:30.
That it's great having a husband that gets easily distracted with work and whatnot, because I was able to. I I wrapped his gift
Jeez.
in the
Snapchat
living
TV.
room, like at my desk.
And he
had no idea.
clue because he's busy playing games.
Either that or working.
Awesome.
Already
Wrecking
knew
service.
Didn't want to.
One's a good man.
No, he had no idea I ordered his gift because I didn't order his gift off of our shared credit card. Or not credit card, but account. I used my own account for it.
Let's go.
Oh, yeah, it wasn't a shared.
So he wouldn't even see the charge to the
That's
account.
cool. So it'll be a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Surprises are nice.
I ordered it from Amazon, but we don't share the same Amazon account. We just share Prime.
I need to play some Pokemon.
Oh god.
Well, I don't know.
Probably could do that.
I'm gonna play Pokey.
Catch.
Poker.
I can't do that one yet.
Da, 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 da,
Yeah, that's what
da.
I'm doing. I'm playing Duel My Abyss and Marbles. I'm multitasking.
Oh my goodness. To be fair, Marbles isn't that hard to multitask with, but I do get easily distracted, so I forget about Marbles
but-
sometimes.
Yeah,
I'm
Marvel.
tired of all the notifications.
Turn it off.
No, I'm sending them all freaking back. Everybody's hearting every conversation and every single thing, and I'm gonna heart them all back.
Oh, Pika Hat.
What?
Pika Hat has been
Yeah,
really
Ooh,
good.
we got.
I was gonna make you a little bit more cozy so you don't sleep. What? That makes
Cozy. I'm gonna go to sleep under this blanket.
Let's see what I got in the Wonder Box.
Pika, pika.
Do you know what I
Where
think
you
you
at?
do? Come on over before. Don't pick. Don't pick. Hold the box up.
No,
Hold the
it was
box.
already
Nah,
picked.
nah.
It was already
Hold the box
I
up.
can't unpick
No,
it.
it got picked.
Hold the box
You have to
up and do
redeem
a
it, Aiden.
fucking, a random jam.
Dreams, you have to. You
It
have to
says
redeem it.
what it was redeemed, so I have to do what was said. I have to follow instructions. If it said choose random color, then that's different.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I have that one on right now. I do have Christmas ones on, but
No, you just
Wait,
look cozy.
in
So
my-
I'm like, you know what? Just
my-
put more cozy.
my
clothes on.
ball kept going in my armpit. I don't think that's supposed to be a thing.
I have no comment. I
don't think balls are supposed to go in your armpit.
Sniff
It
it.
was.
Sniff
Also,
it.
quick catch, guys.
I mean, there are
Never.
worse places they could be, but
Yeah, true.
There are indeed
Yeah.
worse places that balls.
Alright.
Yeah, it's like,
Alright.
yeah, see, it like keeps going to my armpit. I was like,
Fuck
that
it.
one's kind of
Sniff it.
squished. It's not even ball shaped anymore. It's kind of,
Sniff it.
hey, my
when I
arms are
said
clean.
pokey
I
hat
took a
for-
shower a couple hours ago,
Well,
and I put deodorant on. And besides, I have a shirt on, so we're not touching my armpits, actually.
when I said to wear that, I didn't mean.
It's a lot of
part.
sagging? What is sagging?
Oh
That's
no.
There's a lot of sagging.
that's really rude. Who said
That's
that?
rude. That's bad.
I'm very.
Like how your boobs sag.
That's bad.
Sometimes balls
Whoa.
sag too.
Oh, these.
Same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they hang low?
That's why
those
they're-
balls.
Do
Okay,
they,
now we get it.
do they wiggle to and fro?
I'm getting weird images in my head.
Do
that
they
I'm not gonna
hang
describe.
low? Do they wiggle to and fro?
Do your balls
Can you tie him in a
hang
knot?
low?
Can you tie him in a bow?
Oh my god.
Back in time in a knot.
Like I knew
There you
Kimono
are.
had balls.
Balls.
I knew it.
Hang
I might be able to tie them in a
balls.
bow too. I don't know.
Do
Well,
your
the balls are too close to
hang
your
low? Do
face.
they wiggle to and fro? Can you
Ah!
tie 'em in a knot? Can you
Can
tie
you
'em
tie
in a
him
bow?
in a bow?
Do your balls
Oh my
hang
gosh.
low?
Shut the
Do they wiggle to and fro?
Okay.
Do your balls hang low?
low.
Y'all are ridiculous.
Yeah, I know.
Should've-
It's
I
an
just
old
wanted
Boy
her to be more
Scout
They
song.
don't
comfortable.
really-
She's the one.
Ball
Hold on, I wanted her to be more comfortable. She's the one playing with the balls, not me.
You're the balls.
Oh, you got ball tins. Ball tins.
Just nuts. Oh, now I have have chestnuts? Mm,
I still got no comment. of
there we
anything.
go.
Mm-hmm.
Do your nuts
Good
hang
job, proud of
low?
you.
Do they wiggle too?
We're
I'm
at
trying
the
to
end of
do
this
it.
Grand Prix. Where did the time
Oh,
go?
shit, are we?
Yeah. Shane, it's okay.
Poor Shane.
Shane's gonna ban me from my own stream.
Poor Shane.
Pricks.
Third place goes to Michigan with one of my favorite colors because everything in my house is that color.
It is. I can attest to that.
It's like even this thing right here. It's this color.
Teal?
Like
What
my
is that?
kitchen's that. My kitchen's that color.
It is.
Well, you guys would have seen it on the cookie stream. Yes,
No,
Wednesday.
I got.
yeah,
I
I
got
saw
more.
it.
Well, that's rigged.
I saw
On
it.
the cookie stream?
Yeah,
I need,
that's
I
right.
know
That's my favorite.
question.
No, it's okay, it's not my favorite.
I need
Hi.
more.
Battle Cat.
Battle
Dude,
Cat.
What's your question?
No,
James
I
has
thought
got
I
his
was
hand
the
up.
champion.
He's raising his hand.
No.
James is raising his hand because he has a question.
I need a moment to ask a question.
No.
Okay.
I
On
don't
that-
think we have an answer.
On that shelf right behind you. And behind
yeah, it's
Lizzie's
missing.
head at this
Oh, I
point.
forgot to turn on the
What's missing?
present.
What
Oh, maybe it's still on. I don't know.
No, it's
What
definitely
do you
not.
think is this? Oh, Aiden, do you
You
think
wanna
it's
turn it
gonna be
on?
something
There's a little
naughty?
switch
Okay.
behind
No,
it.
no. Where's the dream?
Oh, it's gone.
The
There's
dream
no
is
dreams
here
right now.
with us.
It's temporary, not dream season.
Fucking should be.
There was no room.
What do you mean no room?
No room for dreams when you gotta work 40 hours a week.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Dude, work kind of kills your dreams.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Bro, tell me about it.
Future's required on. Fucking, there's about 4 people in here who'd be like, yep, no problem. We understand.
I'm multitasking, watching stream, and playing the new Pokemon DLC. I keep hearing stuff out of context. Oh yeah,
that's
it
the
may not
only
be out
way-
of context.
That's the only way to hear it.
Yeah, to be fair,
Without
I think
context.
we actually try and purposely.
Nothing is ever in context. Unless it's the air
Smash
horns.
a block.
Then...
Unless you have
Let's
context
go.
on, and then that's all I think.
Yeah, we were talking about, tying things in a bow.
I don't know.
Something I
If
really
you could
want to
throw 'em
say.
to
I'm
and
just
fro.
not allowed to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, being droopy and hanging low.
You
What
should
do
be
you
hanging with your
mean?
friend, not trying to hang balls.
Why? Like,
Oh.
I can't find the fucking claxons. Where's this going at?
I've lost my marbles.
Like, fucking
I did say.
wanna-
I think the title says we lost our marbles, didn't
I
it?
did. I can't
Yeah,
find
so
them
I-
anywhere. Just tell me where they're at.
Oh,
They
yeah,
might be on
go
my
just
head.
look up.
I was gonna say this is like fucking it's like Peter Pan and Lost Boys and Toodles, where he always
lost
did
me
lose his
marbles.
marbles.
Yo.
We never had the marbles to fucking begin
You
with.
stop playing with your
Right?
Lose them.
balls, thank you.
Can't make me. It's fun.
I want to know where the fucking clax is.
we laugh.
So
See you,
fun.
Grace.
I don't know anything.
You're
I am in a
so lucky.
no
So
comment
lucky
stage.
that there's no klaxon stuff that I can see. I'd be
Ah.
fucking smashing that.
Oh, why
button.
not hit play again in the games? I'm gonna get a beer.
Have a good klaxon.
Oh. Keep an eye on artist. She's trouble. Just saying.
Oh shit! What was that?
Oh, my things are breaking.
Is winning. Uh-oh.
She's trouble.
Well, I mean, I'm trouble.
Artist.
Oh,
Oh.
We know you're trouble.
no.
Is
I mean,
it?
there's probably...
You just got first place, is it?
I don't know. Maybe a little
Look at
bit.
that screen. That's trouble.
I did cheat a little bit. Sorry, guys.
All the hacks. Congrats, Lady Michigan and
Not
Splints
cheating.
with the points on the board.
Whoop, whoop.
I know you're the side chick and all, but can you?
Yep, she's on my side.
Because you bought. That's because you bought
Yeah,
it.
the side chick.
There you go. Dude. Oh, it's a Christmas tree, look.
Yee.
It's Christmas.
Oh, Christmas
shit.
tree, oh, Christmas tree.
Exclamation play to get your marble on the track, guys. Exclamation play. 60 seconds on the clock.
Copy motherfucking pasta. I'll be back.
Slunslova.
Slanja.
Da, 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 da.
Oh, this is finally fucking
Oh.
charged. I can unplug. All right.
That sounds like the start of sounds like the sound of a tune. Like
What?
How long has it been since you heard that song?
Oh, fucking a while. But Kimono just kind of gave me the first couple of like tones, and I was just like, that sounds like the first fucking. That's what's it called? Is it
That's what I'm
Debbie's
gonna do
Diner?
when I'm on this bridge.
Is it
I haven't heard that song in
Sure.
forever.
Oh man, that's a fucking.
It's so dark
I
in
don't know
here.
where that came from in my head. I definitely haven't heard it today.
I don't know, but I heard the first like couple of tones
I
of
guess
it,
it's gonna go
or
there.
beats of it. And I was just like,
Electric
that
shot,
sounds
get
like
away
fucking
from me.
Debbie's Diner.
Trouble. Nice balls you got there.
Trouble.
Thanks.
Anywho.
Yeah. I'm just making
I
sure.
paid
you
good
know.
money for them.
Yeah. Making sure you know.
What's that, balls in your
It's
face?
just getting worse.
Sure is.
You pay good money for having balls in the face? Is that what you just said? God
You knew it was
damn.
gonna happen. You knew it was gonna happen. Just a matter of time.
And I thought
Something
I was
like
about to
that.
try to be PC. Fucking hell.
No,
You know
let's
what?
not try those.
No, I'm not even gonna go
Gosh.
there.
Michigan just hogging all the light here. I don't even know what he's
I
doing.
am. All
Oh,
of
he's
it.
falling. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, into
Falling away from me.
another dimension. I don't know what's happening.
Another dimension.
Another dimension? Another dimension.
He's
Another
definitely
dimension.
like leaving everybody else.
Is that
Beastie Boys.
yeah, man, I was
Well,
gonna
don't
say
curse
Fat
me,
Boy
'cause the
Slim, but
game's not
maybe a
over
bit
yet.
different.
No, it's Beastie Boys.
The match. See, you cursed me. Now Dreams is
Intergalactic.
Intergalactic.
I got cursed. Now I'm like in last place. So
What the fuck
Another
is this
dimension.
sim? Oh, okay. I'm not gonna get that high.
like I said,
Never in a month of
Oh,
fucking
like,
Fridays will I ever be able to get that
I'm
high.
in last place now because I felt bad for the rest
Wouldn't
of the
do
game.
that.
I have to go
Artist,
back.
are
and
you
Shane
like
to help
5
him
minutes
out.
ahead of us in the future? Why you're playing 8 again?
Oh,
No, I accidentally did play.
I didn't realize I could accidentally do that. I didn't mean to do that.
You touched your
Anyway,
ear. Don't touch
Shane-
it.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to touch my ear.
Rain's
Oh,
messing
does
with
it hurt her
volume.
ear?
She's touching my ear.
I can't help
That's
you with
a
that.
unique way of touching ears.
Rain
Just
is
hey,
being when I was slacking in the back, 100%.
Don't make me go over there.
I'm just chilling in my chair.
Is that a threat?
Yes.
Or a
Something like that.
It's a promise.
You better take that back.
You will. I'm about to say, Jamie, you'll probably lose. So
I got my blankie and I'm ready for the sleeping stream to start, and I'm gonna put just sleeping, and she's taking over talking. So
yeah, that's why
I don't think we should let me take over, but
It just might take me a while to get there because I have to walk because I don't have a car, so you got time.
See when
Did you see that trade, Jeffron?
What the fuck?
Michigan, why are you going so slow?
He's taking his time, apparently.
Taking my time. Jeez.
You were in the beginning. You were in the lead.
No, I went fast.
We don't talk about that. Gigi, Dreams, Shocky, Lady. Congrats.
I came first.
I don't know, maybe
yeah.
not. If you
I
didn't
don't
see
think
it, then
that's
it didn't
something you should be
happen.
so excited
That's
about.
yeah, I
Mate,
was gonna say, I don't
aye.
think you should be excited about. Yep.
Winning?
Say it. Go ahead, say it. You were about to. Say it.
Yeah, yeah. Say it, lady.
This on the censor bell. We just push that when things should be censored.
Keep
I
going,
need a
lady.
censor button.
Probably should not finish that sentence.
Here's my
I'm not
censor
finishing that
button.
sentence.
Aye.
Not happening.
Like,
Nope. Nope. We're
I'm
good.
Scottish. I can take what you're giving out. Tell me what you're thinking of.
Oh, I can't. I already. No,
I could pick up what you're putting down.
I
I'm
can't play.
scared, but you know, this might be a
I'm
good one.
Butterfingers. I'm Butterfingers. I can't pick shit up. Tell me what you're gonna say, lady.
Oh God. That was
I'm a
bad.
child. Can you guys?
So quiet now, eh?
Scoo!
I'm doing something.
Oh, we all
Oh
are.
yeah?
Oh yeah. Wait a minute. That's weird.
Oh yeah, that's how I joined the Discord channel
Oh,
earlier,
shit,
pretending
I
like
can't
I
do
was the
that.
freaking Kool-Aid man. Oh yeah.
You gotta smash through a wall first.
I tried to.
Oh, accidentally.
Yeah, and then he broke his other shoulder. I was there. I watched.
I was saying a couple of weeks ago that I'd love the intro of like, is it
Oh, artist, you joined
the
too late this time.
peanut
though.
guy? It was like,
He's always late.
Oh
Early
yeah.
or late. It's one or the
Yeah,
other.
it's never in the
So
middle.
we need to type back to her and say, hey, refresh your screen, you're delayed.
It could be. It could be that. Yeah.
Hi. Refresh, maybe.
Ding, ding,
Well,
ding,
if I
ding,
did
ding.
that, it would reduce my chances to win. So.
This is
Yeah.
true.
And
Yeah.
Like that. Dreams, do you need to
Dreams.
refresh as well?
refresh what exactly?
The stream.
I just-
You're way
You're
behind.
a little late there, my guy.
I
The
just
race already
literally
started.
joined-
Just refresh it, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you.
I think I'm here.
Oh, that's such.
Like I literally.
They're not gonna know what that means. Have a
What was
refresh.
that?
I was
Enjoy.
about to say you have to.
Refreshing drink and enjoy life races.
Right?
I'm being obtuse on purpose, okay? You know what
I
I'm saying?
know.
That's cool.
Oh, Joffrey, Battle Cat, and Lady. GG on the points.
I didn't even.
Fast,
finish
fast.
the-
Fate.
No, maybe.
Oh, catch also.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
now
yeah.
play. And poke catch.
Oh boy.
I'm moving my button closer because my bladder's full.
You should go to the bathroom.
I
You
should
have to
probably go to the
loosen
bathroom. You're
your-
probably right.
I'm about to say you have to loosen the button if your bladder's full.
Oh,
Loosen up my buttons, babe. Wait, what?
Let's not do that.
No,
Fuck
because she
no.
said something about her bladder, so I was like, loosen the button. Anyways.
Listen up, my bladder, babe. That's fucking for yeah.
You know what I mean. Come on.
No, mate. Yeah, it's. There's just so many innuendos you can make from all of it.
I have to
Yeah,
stick
there's
to
a
that.
lot.
I'm trying to
But mine
PC.
was-
I have to
myself.
relieve the bladder. When the race starts, hit one.
Mm-hmm.
Hit one, pretty please.
Mm-hmm.
To be fair, Dream, you can't poke and
There's your
catch. You
empty
just gotta
bottle.
poke catch.
Yeah. Well, I said.
I'm
poke
trying
a
to catch a dream.
Okay, some of this stuff.
I said poke a catch.
You should
Yeah.
get a dream
Could I-
catcher.
Do you know
Well,
what?
I have not caught
I'm
him yet.
actually, I
One day
have
I will.
been really considering it for a long time, like genuinely.
Yeah.
But not just like the ones that you put in the window. Like I want a fucking full size wall.
Oh, you want an
dream catcher.
effing one? Why does it have to be an effing one?
Ah,
That
because
can't be a.
fucking-
That was a
Like a
really
red
quick
ring
race.
Behind me, but you can't see it.
Oh,
Go
I
by
didn't
the
make it to
wall.
the bathroom yet. It just went like.
That was a really quick one.
Snorlax hat. Okay, got you when I come back.
Mate, that was
Yeah,
a quick
I'm
pee.
sick and tired
That
of
was
your balls.
super fast race.
Fucking hell.
Okay, so try again.
You haven't went to the
What, you're-
bathroom yet. That's the whole nother thing.
Mate. That's
She's
fucking
working on it.
rapid
I threw
style.
away trash, and then I heard it do the thing, so I came back.
Yeah.
How
To
the
be
fuck
fair,
can you
if
stop
I touch
mid-flow?
anything, it's probably gonna break. So she's got her
It's also
stuff set
probably
up.
covered in pee.
I just
Probably
didn't
also
want to
covered
see
in
her
pee.
balls
Okay,
anymore.
well, don't touch Mono. Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't
Fucking
touch it.
hell. That was rapid style.
Like I said, I was just sick and tired of her balls. So
Man,
sick and tired of them.
All right.
I'll be honest with you, I don't think I could fucking stop that quick mid-flow. Not a chance.
He's got big balls. She's got big balls.
But
He's
I've got the
biggest
biggest balls of the
balls
ball.
of them all.
I got these. Dun, dun, dun,
But you did see the trade, right? You weren't joking.
I don't know what that one is though.
No,
It's a big trade that evolves with your team.
yeah, I don't really care about them right now, to be honest.
Well,
Sorry to say.
I'm more Canadian, I guess.
No, you're just a big hockey fan.
Yeah.
Doesn't make you more Canadian.
Anyways, it didn't go to the Red
Oh,
Wings, which I
'cause-
hope
Because I'm guessing fucking what's his name, Quinn Hughes got traded.
to the Wild.
Well, Tarantino started something with some feet. I don't know.
I was hoping for the Red Wings, they said, but it didn't happen.
Yeah,
He's
that
closer
would've
to
been
home
good.
though.
I think he would have fit better there.
No, he's
really
yeah,
feel.
he's closer to home because he lives in Michigan still, and he comes here after the season. So Minnesota was probably a good place for him because he probably wants to
Wentz.
win a Stanley Cup. But
But-
anyways, that's a whole nother thing. But
Song incoming. Just for
What
you
do
though.
we
What are you
get?
supposed to do with it?
I didn't see the whole
And
thing.
your
I
own
just
and
knew
your
that
own
was-
time.
Different
I
area codes.
just haven't been following them much.
Yeah. I'm just letting you know because it is your team.
Yeah, I thought I read something about it, but I wasn't sure if it actually happened. But yeah, I knew he was.
I
gonna
don't
go
know because you
somewhere.
were
I
there.
think he wanted.
He didn't.
I
He didn't
think-
want to be there anymore.
I'm
so-
occasionally changing
You
it.
guys
Don't
were
worry.
sell and sell on and sell it. It's like
I can
don't
change
wanna be on my
back.
team like that either.
Yeah.
There, we'll
Compared
watch.
to-
We'll just keep watching you,
compared to-
artist.
Compared to this season last year that they had, like this year, I don't know what happened because they had a good season last year.
Yeah, well, you guys started
Mm-hmm.
selling even though you shouldn't have. Anyways, it's a long story we'll get into when I
Got-
do my
got nothing to
NHL.
do. You and I can't control what happened, so.
No, when I do my NHL podcast tomorrow, let's get
Yeah.
we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I was gonna say you guys can talk about that later.
No, that's why
Mhm.
I
Please.
was just letting them know. That's
That's
it.
kind of why I avoided the question the first time around.
You know, Kimono got traded to Maine.
It's a Maine.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For two
That's all.
draft picks. Two Maine people had to go down to Florida. That's how I
I'll
guess.
give you a tour.
But yeah, I would actually wouldn't mind a podcast about this stuff. It would be fun.
You know what's
What's that
stupid? Is
type?
every time I adjust my temperature, it's either too hot or too cold. I can never like get
in the house.
a freaking just right.
Oh yeah, in the house.
How about you just stay to like 37.2 degrees?
Oh yeah, because clearly my thermostat can handle that.
Yeah. Body temperature.
Dude, just shut it
37.2
off
degrees.
because it'll be a
Yeah.
steady cold outside.
Body temperature? Are you kidding me? If the air in my house was like anywhere near 98 Fahrenheit,
I
I'd
would
be
cry.
sweating bullets. No, I keep my house at is somewhere between 64 and 66.
It's 60. It's 62 in my room right now, and I'm loving it.
You're 62.
In my house, it's 62. I love it though.
That's so
because
cold.
17 degrees?
like I said, I'm a furnace. I'm a furnace.
Are you watching
so
me?
it's how it goes.
Dreams, Lady and Michigan
Wiggles.
with the
So
points.
that was.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I'm a furnace.
In Celsius,
Creeper.
37 degrees. It's like 98.6 Fahrenheit. That's body temp.
Freedom temperature. Yeah.
Just keep your fucking room to 36 or whatever. You're fucking jamming.
Get your marble on the tree.
Ooh.
Marbles on the track, guys. Marbles on the track.
How about
1 minute.
how about them marbles?
Whoa, I really was aggressive on that one.
Oh shit. My apologies. That was a link I didn't mean to send.
I can't see it anyway. It says
Yeah.
star.
Strix,
Yeah, it was
dude,
blacked
did you
out.
go to ask.com? Like, what happened?
I don't know. Some people can probably see what he posted, but I
Wait a
can't.
minute. That's very
Wait a
close to
minute.
something else. Am I in though? Because I actually
Are you
in?
No, you're not in at all.
By all means,
I don't know if the cap.
No, definitely
I'm
not.
not capitalizing.
I
I'm
can't
really-
see what
I
he
really
posted. I have,
apologize.
You're in there,
I
Michigan.
I was-
apologize.
Oh,
It
I was
wasn't
being
meant.
serious, but yeah, because I accidentally capped it. And
Yeah. You're in there.
I mean, it's a
You
good
definitely
fucking
Boom.
video.
so-
Don't get me wrong,
Hello.
destroy your ego.
Welcome up, man.
but
Welcome
it
to
wasn't
the
meant, that's all
team.
I'm saying.
About time.
How goes it, man? How goes your Friday? I hope it's going well, and life is treating you well.
I promise you, lady, I'm gonna employ you to just delete that link.
It's not
Nobody can see it
there.
anyway.
We can't see it. We can't see
Yeah,
it to
dude,
delete it. We
the
The bots
already
got it.
killed it, dude.
We see 3 stars. That's
Yeah.
all we
I was,
see.
I was just giving
Yeah.
you, I was giving you crap because it was 3 asterisks, and I'm like, oh, it's ass.com.
I swear to God, it will get
What is
you
that
fucking
program you can
cancelled.
get? It's like Better Twitch TV where you can see stuff like that. But
Yeah.
for me, it just shows 3 stars.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Sounds good. I appreciate. Oh, fucking hell.
Okay,
I can't
so
believe I
far,
made that
good,
stupid
good.
mistake.
Oh no.
Yeah, you're good. Don't
I
pick
don't want
out.
my favorite streamer getting cancelled, man.
Oh, what kind of
what the
link
hell
was
did you
it?
share?
Woo!
Ah, buddy, it's bad. I send it to you.
Wow.
I actually copied it to then send to you.
That's
And
bad.
forgot that I
Oh,
copied
crap.
it to you
Oh, farting.
without exclamation mark. Copy pasta.
Copy pasta.
It was
Again, still don't.
a lot of. I mean, it's a song.
Uh-huh.
It is a song, but there's a lot of
Sure it is.
what was it?
I'm
Language.
assuming there's going to be a lot of the C word.
Words.
No, just
Oh.
a lot of dirty profanity in it.
Either way, it probably would have got blocked because I don't think you can send links. Anyway.
Yeah.
No, you can't.
Nah.
We were
Even
talking
if
about
I had my
balls.
own
Unless maybe if you're a moderator.
I don't know. I think all you have to be is a sub, and you
Oh,
can.
look at Joffrey.
I mean,
GG,
we were
man.
talking about
Second
balls
win.
earlier on.
Second win. Let's go.
You're a star.
Hold
Also,
on
Congrats.
just a fucking minute.
Oh,
here.
am I? Oh, okay.
yeah.
Fucking Jazzy J just comes in and gets a win straight off the
Points
bat.
go
That
to
got me, like,
Joffrey.
fucking
Dreams
9
and
runs.
BattleCat.
You know what's funny is on my side it still
It's
shows
bonus
that I
points
posted
night to night for tracks with less
My
than
side-
50 plays. Oh, that's
My
awesome.
son,
Thanks
we
for letting me know.
We got the
Vin-
Alright,
three.
we're playing roulette.
Purple cat ears. Oh, welcome, welcome, thank you. It's so good to see you, man.
Oh shit! Fucking
I should
why is
play.
it
Has
doing
it been
that?
15 minutes? Sorry. it's a joke.
Exclamation play.
Yeah, exclamation play,
11.
guys. Get your marble on the track. Exclamation play.
Control C. Finally. Thank
Aiden, you
fuck.
gotta stop pasting your porn links, man.
Really fucking tough, man. Like, there's a lot.
This is not the channel for sharing those.
It really
Hold
wasn't.
on, that
You're
wasn't on
supposed
for
to
15
DM
minutes?
people directly.
That was on for-
I'm not trying. I'm
Then you
really
get
not trying to
banned.
publicize myself. Just by all means,
My goodness.
really not a lot to
jeez.
fucking show.
Well, welcome, Felix. I hope you're doing awesome. I'm in the VC. LOL. Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, Jaffron. No.
Yes, hello, Kimono.
What?
Danger
No, Jaffron. No,
Uh-oh,
no, no,
it's a
no,
danger
no.
noodle.
We could be the same balls. It's too late.
No.
It's a
no, we
danger noodle.
can't.
Welcome to the stream.
I didn't-
Markiplier
I
is the stream.
Because I'm playing
Alright.
marbles on my laptop.
Alright.
I'm on Discord on my desktop, so
Guys, if you
Bad
didn't already, hit
bad
exclamation
bad.
play. Don't forget to get your marble on the track. Exclamation
figure it out.
play.
Oh, is it?
You freckle. I
Look at all these
fucking
beautiful
first
faces
game
in
was-
here.
No, you're the one being a bum. Oh, it's me, my ball.
It's bad
Mine
luck.
wasn't
Maybe I
on
wanted
for
our-
15
maybe I
refund.
wanted our balls to
Just
touch, okay?
Rex. Welcome to the stream,
Do you know
man.
why
Welcome,
I
welcome,
don't like the
welcome.
same numbers
Yeah,
everyone
lady,
else?
I need a refund.
Because if
Welcome,
I
everyone.
lose, then
Welcome
no
to
one
the
else loses.
I'm
shenanigans.
sorry, I can't give you a
That's
refund.
the reason why I don't want people to go the same number.
Mm-hmm.
That's just too much
Unbelievable.
superstition. Marbles is all random, man.
It's not. Well, it is, but it's not.
Superstition,
Barnaby.
random, I don't know. Something like that.
No one else.
No,
could-
he's being
you know-
superstitious about me using the same ball as
Oh,
him, but I didn't know.
I was like, what happened?
Wait,
Splits
wait.
this beer.
Wiggles done
He-
it the
he
other
went
week, and
invisible.
He's like, oh, I'm gonna go 11.
As I
went
came
on,
back.
and I was like,
Anyways,
fucking
cheers. Hold on. Cheers for
I didn't hear you say
the
that.
cheers for
Oh,
the
where
refund.
is my beverage?
Oh, that's a good
Cheers for the
question.
refund.
Cheers.
that I
Cheers
needed.
for whatever. Cheers.
Just
give
Yeah,
you a
for my
refund.
refund that wasn't.
Your refunded
Yeah.
conversation?
No, because you didn't have the other thing on for 15 minutes.
Oh.
So that's my refund.
I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm glad you got your refund.
Why is it featuring me? I don't want to be featured.
Why not feature you? It's your channel, not ours.
Look, we got 2 VIPs on stream.
Mhm.
1 mod.
I'm not cool enough for VIP.
1 mod and 2
Electro
VIPs
shock.
competing.
Sounds about right.
4 subs.
How
I
can
can't be a
how-
mod
how
and
can I-
VIP.
And
so-
2 beautiful
Yeah.
How come? Are they like
Besties.
joining us for like
Welcome.
XP and stuff?
Whoops.
Because like, are they joining us for XP?
Oh,
Like,
good.
I know that we don't really kind of. Well, I certainly don't play a lot. I only.
Either
play
Yeah,
I
you
wanna
get
be
the
a
XP
VIP,
and it
I
adds
wanna
up to global XP and you earn prizes globally once you reach a certain XP.
Is it
So
right
by
connection
joining
Wi-Fi?
on to
Oops.
like random streamers that are just kind of playing for fun.
I think you get those
And
little
you-
badges
and you
once
end
you
up winning.
reach
Mhm.
10,000 XP, like the little symbols and stuff. You have to
Yeah.
reach 10,000 XP for the season.
Fucking wild.
Mm.
So 10,000 XP is a goal each season.
Yeah, I was
to earn
gonna say,
stuff.
Shockey's done almost 2,000 races.
Yeah, Shaki's already at double the XP that it would be my dream goal to get right now.
So he's.
He's
what-
got 26,000 points right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and how out of
Poketch.
216
Slugma.
216 wins, right?
Catch to catch slugma.
So let's go to the likes of just for fucking shits and giggles. Let's go to the likes of myself, right? So he's
You
got
have
26,000 and
748
200 points of 6 wins.
You've
How many
done
races though?
73.
How many races?
You've
72 races.
done
Yeah.
73
how
races.
many races? How many races he done?
Probably a lot more.
He has done 19.
Oh,
Okay,
1940.
1,940.
Yeah.
A lot more. Yes, like I said. Yeah.
Lots of
Almost
races.
2,000.
So he's like 30%.
That's somebody that races
actually,
every
20
night.
Yeah.
26% win.
Look at those points.
Jaffron didn't even finish.
26%
No,
win
I'm sorry,
poor
Jaffron, that
Jaffron.
you didn't finish.
rate, I think.
All right, Grand
Okay.
Prix drum roll. Who's it gonna be? Who you guys think is gonna be in
Not me.
3rd?
I'm not.
It's fucking
Place.
Not me.
I'm
Did
not
I
so
run out
sure.
of time or something?
3rd place.
Yeah, I think it
It's
ran out.
gonna be who?
Either that or
place,
you fell
Mono.
off.
Mono.
Jaffron.
Third place,
No.
Mono.
No,
Oh.
no. 2nd place.
Oh.
Do you know why you won? Ah, fuck it. I swear to God. Do you know why Jaffron won? Because
He didn't
fucking
win,
stole
though.
my number.
1st
He's
place
not
is
third.
going to
I
go
didn't
to. Who's it gonna
The last one you didn't
Number
finish.
though.
be? You need to just start talking, Dreams. Just stop talking right now.
Oh, would you look at that?
Just stop
You won the
talking.
Grand Prix.
All that complaining, and he's at the top of the podium.
Dumb.
Wow.
I take back everything.
Wow.
I take everything back. I take everything back. Do you know how long it's been since I've been at the top of the podium? Do you know how long it's been
Last
since I've been
week?
at the top
I
of
don't
that fucking
know.
Podium? Fuck,
I'm
it
going
wasn't.
for
We're
years.
talking months back. Months back since I've been at the top of that podium.
All I hear is complaining, and then
That's what I'm
And then
doing
he's
right
got
now.
Yeah.
the podium after all the
That's
complaining.
Literally how.
Ow. He does so much.
Oh, I won.
So you know what that is, Jeffron? That's Scotland. It's like we're sick and tired of fucking losing, but see when we win.
So less than 50 is what we're shooting for.
It's fucking, we don't
Because
care.
there's extra XP for those.
I'm sorry.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, that is literally the way.
Less than 50.
It was a
Play.
fix. It was.
Thanks
cheap,
for letting me know
it
about
was
that.
This, and it was that, and
Boatman.
everyone was
Yeah.
like,
Thank you.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, Bowman came and told me. It would help if I read the announcements. Even though I have all the Marbles announcements sent to my Discord and an informational
have,
channel for myself, I don't necessarily get
Don't
time
pay
to read
attention
them
to it,
all.
yeah.
I'm usually so busy.
Do we have splints in the channel still?
Exclamation play to get your marble on the track, guys. Exclamation plays. Let's go.
Can I have 10 marbles on the board?
How do I do that?
I have to
How do I do
be
the-
silent
the
for a little
noises?
bit.
Okay.
I want
Well,
the
my
noises.
ear.
Oh, okay. You're doing your hair.
Mm-hmm.
My head itches now. I don't know why. I blame the hats.
It might be.
I'm
I have like hairs that were like sticking out that were bugging me.
I blame
I
all
want
the
to have
hats.
99 marbles on the board.
20 seconds.
Mm.
Oh, it's not ever announced. They try to be sneaky like that. Oh, so I wouldn't even have known.
How dare they be sneaky?
Thank you.
We also have
I would have
a
had no
950,
idea.
A 950 competing against us.
Yeah. Yep, that's Grant.
Mhm.
Grant
Love
is
it, Wade.
950. He's been here all day.
Yep.
Or since I
Love
started.
it worried. Love it worried. There's so many
Grant.
fucking big players here. We
Yeah?
got 5.
Boatman.
I was gonna say Boatman's 580.
Let's
We got
take a
fucking
look
what?
at Boatman here. Boatman has competed in 3,803
He's
races.
even got the fucking hams as a border.
Oh yeah, there's an app so you can customize
And
your marbles.
he has
That's why I have my mag one.
over 49,000 points.
3,000.
They change it once in a while too. Ham scam.
600.
Yeah, you can go in the
Yeah,
app,
that's
guys,
like
and you
a-
can totally get different stuff.
I'm
You can totally deck your marble out.
so out my league.
Yeah, there's a whole app for it. I have to log into mine.
Yeah, I'm logging into mine now. Woo, GG, Michigan! Michigan,
picked 11
Grant
as well.
and Dreams with the points this round. And see, only like the
Michigan, you
top
picked
3
11.
people even get the
no.
points. So that's why you have to race so many races. Play! Exclamation play to get your marble on the track, guys! Exclamation play. One minute on the clock.
Do you know, I can't do it.
No, I
Can't
do.
do it.
Let's see. What do
I
I
can't
want
do
to
it.
do to my marble? I've already joined, but yeah. What do I want to look like
You
today?
can add stuff onto your marble even though you've.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
yeah.
you know, that's how I have like the wings and stuff. You get to decorate and do however you want to look. You just got to go into the app and decorate yourself.
Oh,
See,
you can do the
like.
app. Yeah, I don't have that app. I just turn up and shoot shit. Have fun.
See what skin do I want?
Then you luck gain points so that when I
What is
do enter
this?
the app, I'm fucking.
Oh, that is cool. Holy crap! Look at that.
Oh, that's pretty
I don't know
cool.
when I got
You
that one.
sure?
Hold on, let me turn down my brightness so it'll show. Good luck, everyone.
What you got?
You can't tell on here as much, but it's kind of like silvery and sparkly. There.
Oh, that was cool.
Yeah, it's got like dimension and depth to it and movement. So.
Yeah.
But I did that on the
It
app.
looks like
That's what I'm talking about.
noughts and crosses.
Yeah. So, but say I did this on the app. You can change everything on here. So that way, like, you don't even have to hit your number. If you choose a certain skin on the app, you stay that skin. You don't have to hit a number every time.
Huh.
And automatically, you're just defaulted to that number.
See, the problem that I have with the app is that I'll remember it for tonight, next week, or the week after.
Mm-hmm.
I probably won't remember.
Then, have any of those? I had the butterfly. That.
I also can't do anything else because I'm not spending actual money. I don't have the currency to do the things.
Yeah,
I don't
you
wanna
get
spend actual monies.
a lot of the currency you'll get from
But I can't use the blue currency. It won't let me.
Yeah, I think blue can only be spent on certain things, and each color can only be spent on certain things.
Also, you cheated.
I do not. You guys see nothing. I know nothing.
You definitely cheated.
Cat,
I love
artist,
it.
Joffrey.
Look,
Oh, not
all
everybody
the
made it in
people-
this time.
Of all the people that I thought would never agree with me, Lady agrees with me. Kimono, you fucking cheated. You fucking cheated. It's hacks. My hacks.
Oh, hacks. Yeah, I'm hacking in the app right now. Download the app and you can hack too.
Yep.
Fucking.
Not sponsored.
mad hacks. Yeah, it's gonna say like how much commissions you get from me fucking joining that, like
Well, I mean, everybody can earn commission when drops are active.
Well.
So yeah, like I just changed my skin. I think.
It's gonna be me.
I think I changed my look. Let me go see. Oh no, it didn't change on there yet. I didn't hit save. Dang it.
The person who's got the world record is called Your Mom Ate My Acid.
What? How do I save what I change it to?
Right?
I forgot. That's my other account. I'm playing a different account.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm playing a different account because that one was
Sounds made up.
How do I save what I changed it to?
I forgot the password. Forgot the password to that one, so.
Yeah, of course you did.
No.
Okay.
Oh,
Never,
I didn't even see it.
It never existed. That's why
Dang
you
it.
forgot it.
Next race, I will have my new stuff equipped.
Hey, bring away my secrets, motherfucker.
Next
bring away my
race.
secrets.
Oh, it didn't update my picture. That's weird. I changed my profile picture on Twitch.
I'll be back in a minute.
Oh.
What? That was a quick race.
That was.
Where'd Joe go?
Points go to BattleCat, Artist, and Shocky. Artist is getting in every one of these now. Look at that. You guys got competition.
I think I was just
Dash or BattleCat's going for the podium.
BRB.
Alrighty. I think I hit the wrong button.
I can use the blue currency to open chests. Isn't that good?
He dreams because he is going to miss out on this race because he didn't hit play before he walked away.
That race reminded me of a water slide, the last one.
Oh, it still has that skin though, but it did add the effect. Oh, interesting. I hit something wrong when I saved. But it did take off the wings.
Oh.
Interesting. Oh, maybe because I hit 7 in chat, maybe? Mm.
Oh, yeah, because yours is probably set to 7.
Yeah, I bet
Do
it overlaid the one over top of the other.
Maybe you should just change it to play.
What is this? Grapes in space with arms?
Mm-hmm.
In a skillet?
Mm-hmm.
Those are alien eggs.
Eggs? I don't know. What is
Alien
it,
eggs.
Grant? Please tell me. What is this, Grant? And then we have Boban looking all
And a
fancy
ham.
here.
It's a walk. He said
It's a beaver. It's a ham beaver.
Space grapes
walking grape.
and a walk.
Space grapes and a walk. I like it. You're walking grapes.
But
Then we have a
who
ham
cooks
beaver.
grapes? Wait. I guess you do for wine.
Then we have American flag. Puffer
Oh.
print. Puffer dog print.
Mm-hmm. Mine's so plain to.
Yep. Oh, artist is taking on the 8-ball. Joffrey has Skylar. Marble. So cute.
I didn't even know. I just
And then we have over here Shane with
didn't
the
see the
white
face.
marble.
Cute.
And Splints with the beep beep of a sheep marble. I'm surprised Shane doesn't use that one. Hamburger is great.
Mm.
Hamburger. Hamburger. So would y'all call the ham hamburger? Hamburger. Or is that the vehicle?
Lamborghini?
Hamburgini. Oh, Hamburgini. Okay.
Like a Lamborghini.
Hamburgini. Now, apparently I can't say words very well. Hamburgini.
I was also snacking.
I was fixing to type words and I forget my commands don't work anymore. I gotta do the manual thing. Words.
Remind me to see if I can get your bot fixed.
It's a Google issue.
How rude.
I had to I ran malware bytes and it blocked some stuff and that's when it stopped working. So it blocked it, or that or it was malware or my firewall blocking my bot. One of the two. So I gotta figure out what's going on. I think it's a Google issue though. So I could have to reinstall Google and I don't want to.
Gross.
Because then I have to relog into everything.
Yeah.
I'm being lazy. Oh, I forgot to hit start. Dang it. Rude. Rude! I was trying to give Dreams time to get in here and he didn't make it. Look at that.
You crushed his
Shampoo
dreams.
rolling!
I'm already in there, never mind.
Alright, we're gonna hit start because I sat there and did nothing.
10
seconds. Let's go! Also, poke catch if you catch Pokemon. Then we dropped off the face of the earth. Go, Grant, go! Go, Shane! Hamburgini. This boatman gonna catch up with his Hamburgini. He should be faster than everyone. Seems like he's running a little slow. Am I in there? Yeah, I'm in there.
Yes, you're in there. You're in there.
Wow. Fuck you, pizza.
You're gonna let out a meow for no reason. I gotta put my feet up. That's the thing.
I know. I'm used to being at my desk and I have a little stool that lets
I
me.
need something under there. I do.
I cross my legs because I have a little stool.
I think I have one of those on my wish list that you put your feet on under your desk. But
you know
I took it off.
They make attachments for the Secret Labs.
Yeah, I don't want that.
Well,
first chair I ever had the footstool in it, and that's the one that tried to murder me. I don't want to get murdered again.
That's fair.
Anyone wants to get murdered.
Yeah, my first chair
especially by
tried to
a
murder me
stool.
multiple times. The footstool made the chair unbalanced, and if you slightly lean forward, the chair would try to topple over, and I'd get pinned between my desk and the chair.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
And then, like, one time I whacked my head
That just sounds
and
like it was
ended up
made poorly.
under the desk. I ended up under the desk with the chair on my back, like a turtle shell. It was pretty messed up. So yeah, that was the murder chair.
Sounds like that one was just
I mean,
made
Absol
poorly.
has a new mega evolution, and it's awesome. GG, great.
Interesting.
Do you think it would be better to fall forward or backwards though?
I'd prefer to fall backwards, to be honest.
Well, I like hit my head, and so
I mean, either way, you
either
would
gonna
hit
hit
your
your
head.
head.
I guess if you fall backwards though, you land like the back of your head's gonna land on the back of the chair, right? As
Probably.
Well, as if the
You have
chair's
a
higher than
back
you.
to it, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that chair like toppled over with me like 3 times, and then eventually broke itself to the point that the footrest broke off, and then it just sat crooked forever like this. So I would sit in it, and the chair was actually at an angle. It wasn't straight, so that was not good for my back. It was a bad chair, very bad chair.
Yeah.
And then Stream helped me get this one. So I have a better chair, a much stronger, safer chair that isn't gonna murder me.
No more murder chairs.
No more. Murder chairs are the worst. Has anybody else ever owned a murder chair?
Nope.
Yes.
No, I have a lazy boy from my chair, so
Michigan had a murder chair. His chair tried to skewer him.
It sure did. I do remember that.
Yep.
It tried to skewer him, you know?
But I'm alive, and I can talk about it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. His chair wanted to do butt stuff.
Well, we keep that story somewhere else, but
I thought he was into that kind
Oh
of
my
thing.
god.
No, the chair didn't buy me enough dinner. Yeah.
His chair did not buy him dinner. He just say he got rid of that chair real quick.
Yeah.
That's like a nightmare to have a chair trying to do that to you. No, thank you.
Luckily, I knew that.
Nobody
what
wants
the
to be
chair was trying to do.
skewered by their chair. This is not a barbecue. This is a game night. That's it.
Yeah, like I said, my
See, I
chair
changed
did not like me.
my background
Yeah.
ring, the square. I got like space things. Your old chair broke your toe. I believe that. Chairs are evil. I swear.
Dude, I would throw that right outside if they have it. I'm like, nope, you're outside. Chair.
Chairs are evil.
When you hit your toe on a source, then you can do.
I had a rocking chair try to break my toe before, and it just ripped off my toenail instead.
That's fun.
Wow.
Chairs
Did
are
you
bad.
Throw it on the fire or
No.
or just...
No. GG Rain. Look at you.
I don't know.
Yeah. What hacks are you using? Because you're
I'm over at Mono's.
Probably using. Oh yeah, you're probably using her hacks because you're looking that way. So.
Only broken bone I know of, and it was because of my computer chair. See? Sitting is dangerous.
It can be.
Sorry. And now we wonder why, Japanese people sit on the floor. They don't trust chairs. They're smart.
Honestly, that is.
They're way smarter than us in many, many ways, educationally and apparently about chair facts.
I don't disagree on that one.
If you sit on your own butt, you're less likely to hurt yourself.
Apparently.
True.
No, Mono's not at Ryan's.
Or is
Ryan's in the closet.
So is Ryan at...
Exclamation play, guys. Get your marble in the chat. Exclamation play.
I thought you guys were at Ryan's house, to be fair.
No.
See, I still figured I forgot to go in there and try to figure
He's
that out.
got a closet at Mono's.
He doesn't own a house.
Yeah,
he
yeah.
rents my closet out.
He has a house, so if you guys
Which
go
he
in the
still
closet,
owes me for every month he's been here. Speaking
you guys
of
go in the
rent.
closet, you are in his house, so technically.
Yeah. He's not very good at paying his rent.
No.
Well, does he promise, like, oh, I'll pay you double next week?
Well, he promises foot massages, but that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, that's...
Yep.
But that's the rent.
Apparently.
Damn.
Let me live in the closet and I'll give you a foot massage every month.
Apparently doesn't happen.
No.
It's like, you take showers, your feet are clean.
Dude, calls for some, He's afraid I have pizza on my toes. Yeah.
Oh yes.
Well, you just
the infamous
you
pizza
basically
toes.
just proved it. You proved it by your newest,
All right.
But yeah, lady just knock on the door and say, "Shut up." No, just kidding.
Getting sneaky.
Yep.
Well,
You got 20 minutes.
20
minutes. And then she turns into a pumpkin.
I just missed it.
Something like that. I just haven't gotten all
Just
this
so
week
you
this
know.
week.
Not me.
I
It's
get
her
it.
turn. It's been a long week for all of
What
us.
do you have to do to not make sure you don't turn into a pumpkin?
You have to sleep.
Sleep.
Sleep is the only cure.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, Pokemon, get in the freaking ball.
I have a
Poor
couple
Pokemon.
slippers, but they went at
It was lit and I needed to catch the kitty.
Mm.
Gotta have the kitty.
Good kitty.
Sleep is good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
We all need the sleeps. GG, Splints. The Lurking Splints got first place, followed by Michigan and Shocky.
story of my life. I'm the sidekick.
Goo. You got 32 points for that. Don't even.
We don't talk about it.
Exclamation play to get your marble on the track, guys. Exclamation play. Let's go. Oh, what's he got now? What is this? What is
I'm
it?
not using my one and only Master Ball in this.
Is it like a... I forget what shape that is. It's kind of like a round...
It's
Diamond
almost
shape.
like a weird
Yeah.
football.
Weird football? Is that what we're calling it? Calling it weird football.
It looks like a
It's
weird
like
football
a-
to me, to be honest.
It's very green. I like it green.
One of those cookies you break.
Exclamation play, guys. You got 1 minute to get your
Fortune
marble on the
cookies.
track. Hurry,
It's a
hurry,
fortune
hurry. What is it? Whip whap. Whip whap? Wait,
Whap.
what are you using a master ball on? What?
No, I'm not using a Master Ball on anything. I was trying to catch a Pokemon, and I selected the Pokeball
throwing
thing
that ball.
on Go, and it was
She
being
needs
mean
the-
and trying to make me use the Master Ball.
There are master
She
balls
wants
in
the
Go.
Master Ball.
There
I
is.
have a
One.
singular one.
There's one, and you're supposed to
You
use
use
it for
the
the
X.
legendary that comes to you in the wild. Because you don't want to use it on anything else. Because the ones that appear in the
So
wild are
nice.
rare. It just like,
Master Balls.
Randomly spawns, yeah.
yeah. And when you use the blue incense, they're supposed to spawn from that.
Oh, the Daily Adventure one?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
They're more likely to spawn from that one. And they're more likely to spawn on an event.
Mm. Yeah, no, I was trying to catch a Pommy. It tried to make me use a Master Ball to catch a Pommy.
No, thank you.
Mm-mm.
ketchup on you. What about mustard?
I just got tit pig with the blue incense. Tit
Pig.
pig. Tit pig.
I do like the artwork with Xerneas up there.
Hmm?
The loading artwork when you load in the Xerneas up at the top.
Good luck, all. Shane's got his hacks on as he's going down the rice noodles.
Yeah, it's called a mod perk
Something like that.
because
A nimble.
Now he's playing music.
your cheats to the mods. I know.
Nimble. The silly little cricket. Okay, I caught it. I don't want this guy either, but I guess I'll try and catch it anyway.
They're still messaging. Stop! It's almost 10 o'clock at night.
Work people?
Yeah, work people. You think group texts are the worst? Work group texts are the worst.
Is it because they're actually talking about work, or
It's because there's
they
15
just-
people and they
that's what I
talk, and then everybody reacts to everything. So then you have
Yeah.
all the reactions
Yep.
in
Yeah,
addition
like-
to the
like-
text.
look. Are they actually talking about work, or is it like a funny, like,
It's like,
thing?
great day, guys. That was awesome. This was fun. Thank you. Blah, blah, blah. Woo,
So
wow.
nothing like
Hee
too
hee.
crazy. Yeah.
No, it's not like you need to get your butt in gear and do this. No.
Oh, they unlocked another heart for friendship now.
Oh.
So we can gain more
Aw.
friendship.
Oh my gosh.
You guys can be more friends.
Yeah.
Grand Prix, here we go, here we go. Who's it gonna be? Who's gonna be third place on the podium?
I'm
Who do
gonna
you
say
think?
it's gonna be Sean, just because I want him to win tonight.
Shane?
Shane.
Sean.
I was like, who's Sean?
Sean's not here.
I said the wrong word. Yes, I apologize for saying the wrong word.
I- DG!
Shane, Sean.
Second place goes
Shane,
to.
you're so
Let's give second place to Boatman.
Nope.
Nope. Shucky! Let's give first place to. I think it's gonna be Battle Cat, but I'm gonna just give it to somebody else just to be nice. I'm gonna say it's gonna be Grant. It is Grant! Holy cow! I totally
tried to
gave it
help
to Grant.
Sean
Grant,
Shane.
I gave you first place. Congratulations.
No, you're like a
I
fortune
gave
cookie.
you first
Can you crack-
place.
can you crack it open?
That was hacks for sure. Thanks, you're welcome.
Wait, why is that? Why is it hacked? Why is it
Oh,
hacked?
because I called it and it was,
Yeah.
it was exactly who got
I
first.
I tried to help them out.
All right, we're just gonna do. Let's go back in here and do. We're gonna do individual races for a bit, and we're gonna do
What about battle?
under. Oh, look, that one's a link at.
That one's an easy one. It's got a 0% elimination rate.
Yeah. Play.
0.
Let's go, Pokecatch guys. Also, if you're catching Pokemon in Pokecatch,
I catch magic cards.
I play the sauce
I-
black sheep. These
I
black
think it's
sheep.
supposed to be an emote, and it's not
It's
that.
broken. It's
Mhm.
broken. You play. It's broken. It's broken. All right, 1 minute though. 1 minute. You have 1 minute to use your broken emote.
Hmm?
1 minute on the clock. I love how when you do with the ones with the twigs float around separately from. It's like the body parts
Yeah.
are missing. You need to do that again, Miss
Oh, yeah,
Shenanigan.
yeah.
He's like only has some of his body parts are like all floating around separately.
Right?
So-
You have to catch them, I guess.
Ooh, I caught the Pokemon. So did Dreams. GG Dreams.
Well, I like.
Good job.
Sorry, I do like that.
Mm.
The pink.
I didn't realize which one it was either.
Fuck, did I win something?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got one of the inappropriate Pokemon.
All right, we have 8 people on the track. Who's missing? Sorry,
right?
exclamation play.
Okay, I'm in. No, wait, I'm not in. Actually, sorry.
I keep
No,
meaning
I
to
am in.
try. I
I
caught
don't
a
know if
shiny in ZA earlier today, making a total of 4. I can't wait to get the shiny charm. I bet you can. You need
know
the shiny
what?
charm so you can catch all the shinies.
Kind of borderline giving the fuck up on, or giving up.
Also, why am I
on
yellow?
playing the marbles. Like, I'm fucking all
Oh,
in
yeah,
with
yeah,
this.
'cause it
with
really
this
counts
Pokemon
Oh!
game, because apparently I can win at Pokemon.
Apparently,
Yeah, you can catch all the Pokemon.
I'm yellow because apparently I played this one and I'm the
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're the world record holder and the local record holder. So that's why you're yellow. You're special. Rain is
Mhm.
special.
You're special.
Shane might
Isn't
take it
yellow,
from
like,
me.
More like a sick.
So someone might end up taking it from me.
Yellow.
Yeah, it looks like it's gonna might
Black and
happen.
yellow,
World
black
record
and
It could be
yellow.
holder of
Battlecat.
this. You're the,
Battlecat
hold on,
could
let
take
me
the world
fucking,
record.
like, hold up.
No, she
hold up,
is.
Hold up.
This is her
Pause.
track.
Fucking
She...
pause.
It is my track,
Pause.
apparently.
Pause.
He's
I don't know what else
trying.
to
Minimize.
do.
He is trying,
Minimize.
for sure.
Pause. Pause. Lady.
Yeah, let's pause it.
Hmm.
Am I right in hearing that you're the world record holder of this?
Yes, she is.
This
particular
one.
This
fucking
map.
Mm-hmm.
If you actually look at the screen,
Yeah, it's up
on
at the
the
top.
right.
That's why I'm yellow.
Where's the
She's
fucking
very
gold
special.
medal? Where's
Okay.
the fucking like?
It's a yellow name, that's what it is. Oh, it's Shane now.
You know, I love that pink.
Come on, get out of that corner.
sandwich.
Jeez.
I don't
Shane.
know why it's weird.
Shane,
Well,
please don't take it away from me.
He's
oh, I'm
trying.
definitely not.
Shane, please don't take it
He's
away
trying
from
to
me.
take it away.
Please don't take it away
If
Well,
from
he has
me.
to beat
Slow your
original
roll,
Beyond
Shane.
one.
Slow down. I'm just kidding.
anything-
Yeah, slow your roll.
If anything, I'm in complete.
I don't know. I don't think he's gonna do it.
Damn it, Battlecat took
No,
it.
right here. It's,
awe and shock.
Nowhere. It just sounds like
Did he beat it?
Battlecat.
Took it
And
from me.
stole the
You
world
beat your world
record
record.
from
No,
Lady
no,
Rain.
By 0.156.
Oh my
Battlecat
gosh.
is the new world record.
What?
Fuck.
Oh
we're
my
completely
gosh.
rigged.
Hey, Battlecat. how
Okay,
much
we're
did you
gonna
fucking
stay
do?
Hold on, I
on
know-
this
hold on, I
track.
know
and
where
we're
he
gonna do
lives.
it again. Because y'all keep breaking world records. We're gonna do that same track
Let's
again.
find out.
Anyways,
Alright,
lady,
get
I
in
know where
here.
he
Hurry
lives,
up.
so
It's your
you
chance
Alright,
to break the world
hold on.
record.
Hold
I want
on,
it
hey,
back. Give it back.
Fucking repeat, rerun.
Yeah,
Rerun
we
that
are. We're
motherfucker.
rerunning it. We're
Is it
rerunning
like a
this
very
track. Get
new
in.
track?
Get
That's probably
in.
what it is. A very
Rerun.
new track.
It's one of the new ones, yes.
Yeah, that's why it's.
What
See
I
if you
win- what
can
if I beat my record
break this world
again?
record. You got 1 minute to get in here.
Got
What
1
if
minute
I
to get
break
in,
the
guys.
world record
Let's go.
again? My own record.
Oh fuck.
Yep.
Yeah, you could very easily
It's
break your own.
fucking hell. I know. I get it. Chill the fuck out, Pokemon community. Exclamation.
Pokemon already
Fight it,
escaped.
fight
Oh,
it.
fuck.
Already escaped.
Wrong fucking exclamation.
It's
Give it-
like,
Aye,
what are
you
you
better not fucking
even
start
trying
without
to
me.
do?
Do not start without me. Exclamation.
30 seconds for another world record.
There better not be
Oh.
another. There better not be another living in this fucking channel.
Spooky
I will
games are
fucking
on
flip
sale
a
right
lid.
now.
Ooh, spooky.
They're so chill.
All right, there's 9 of you
No
going for the
livings.
West world
No
record.
livings.
See if
Just
you can
me.
beat Battlecat's time. Lake Lady.
What? How rude.
I'm actually fucking shocked.
Oh, look at Dreams. He thinks he's gonna do it.
I don't know about that.
Not a chance. Not a chance.
I don't know
Don't
who
you,
goes down the hole
don't you
first.
not,
Oh,
don't you
oh,
not.
oh. Shane's trying to do it.
Damn, that's a big hole for the rest of us. Come
Mhm.
on, guys.
I bet you.
Come
I
on.
fucking bet you 10 or Shane
Oh, Battlecat's not
We all can.
having it.
We all can
Battlecat's
share
not having it.
Okay, guys.
Battlecat's like, if anybody beats this record, it's gonna be me. Nope, Boltman says, woohoo! I've been here longer. I'm more experienced. I know how
I
these
know, right
races
down-
work.
right
I
down the
got
street.
the ham. I got the ham. I got the everything.
Yup. I know how these races work. You're not getting it. Boatman says, I want this. I got my Hamburgini. Oh, Battlecat says, I ain't dealing with that Steve mess. So Boatman got left behind. Battlecat's not going. Battlecat's relentless. He's not going to give up his world record.
Apparently not.
Is he gonna beat his own record?
Yeah, he goes hard.
He might break his own record.
He might just beat his own record again. He called it before the race even started. He was like, "You mean I can beat my own record?" I'm like, "Yeah."
He's like, "I'm in the game."
He's a league ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
He's fucking skipped past the mid.
Oh.
Is he gonna actually beat his own record? That would be cool.
He got a little slowed down there.
Just a tiny bit. Not much. He's skipping the stairs. He just like, what? There were stairs there? Where?
I think
stairs where?
Practicing.
No, he didn't beat his record.
He didn't beat his own record, but he got pretty close.
What?
Do you know what?
He got pretty close.
Mad respect.
Dude, I didn't even know how to work this.
He did not want to let go of that record.
I hate this course.
Is that like the world record in the sense of like the world record?
Yes. Around the world.
Yeah.
Worldwide.
It's a newer. Hold on. It's a newer course too. So
Boatman didn't survive.
No, poor Boatman.
Boatman died.
Who pushed Boatman out?
Yep.
Well, he's a boatman. He can swim.
All right.
We run. I'm gonna fucking beat that record. I want to beat that record.
All right, rerun.
Well, we're just gonna keep doing
rerun.
Yeah, I don't give a flying
Bop, bop,
fuck. I want to beat that motherfucking record.
Rerun, let's go.
Catch. My bad.
Break this record.
The person. Hold on, the person that made this is gonna be like,
This looks like the pineapple. We're gonna call it the. It's called Fancy Chasing Base, but it looks like I don't know. I'm gonna call it the pineapple track. It's bright and yellow and pineapple-y.
Everyone pick 11.
Do not pick 11.
I'm using my own.
I'll pick 13.
11. I'm just saying, fair play to you, Battlecat, but I'm fucking coming for that record, mate.
I want my record back.
I will.
Well, I don't know.
I will play this game IRL to fucking beat that record.
It wasn't me.
Come on.
I'm coughing. I need to drink more water.
Listen.
I love my stomach. My water.
Cigarettes you smoke.
This is your last chance for the night because it is almost 10 o'clock. And Lady turns into a pumpkin at 10 o'clock. So this is the last race. This is your last chance to beat the record.
That's the one time the shoe.
So she will be a pumpkin for a little bit.
The slipper doesn't fit.
It might be a pumpkin for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Watch, right? Hold on, 10 o'clock, Dreams. She's turning into a pumpkin. Let's see.
Or a slipper.
We didn't specify that it had to be 10 o'clock Eastern.
No, there was.
It's California time, but she has to be asleep in 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I won't lie to you.
Or is it Central Time and it's 1 hour?
It's Central Time.
Central Time.
It could be English.
You were born in Central Time, right?
No, I was actually born in California time. So
she was born in California time. Never mind. So it counts with the time she was born.
Come on.
Okay. We won't talk. Let's see who's up for it. It's gonna be Kat or Joffrey.
Motherfucker.
Come
on, please get above 7. Fucking, let's go. Let's win.
At least he said screw to that.
KimonoKat, if you get
fucking died. And Battlecat's like stalking me. And so is Joffrey. Joffrey's like,
come on, Kimono.
Ooh, Joffrey's going for it.
Come on, Jaffy. Come on, Jaffy.
No, you're saying screw it.
I'm trying to hold it.
I couldn't hold it.
We're touching balls.
Oh, you son of a bitch.
Poor Shane.
Come on.
Shane, poor Shane. Oh.
Jaffy's going for it.
I'm coming for you, Cat.
Uh-oh. Got slowed down.
Shit. This is beating Jimmy's record, by the way.
Nope.
Yep, for now.
You might be a little delayed.
Uh-oh.
No.
Come on, Aiden.
coming
Come
back.
on in.
No!
Fucking,
You guys,
come on in.
the
Come on
record.
I'm
in.
coming back.
Come
beat
on
the
in.
record.
Yeah, we're not beating the record though.
This
We're
is
really slow this
garbage.
round. Oh, I skipped the stairs altogether and rode the rail. And now I'm on the wall. I'm on the roof.
Say
What the
she's a
fuck are
skater
you
boy.
doing?
and then-
Detour. I died.
Yep.
What kind of skateboarding looking
What's
shit
wrong
was
with
that?
I know,
Ryan
like,
Cat?
So she's a skater boy.
I don't know.
Please tell me I'm launching myself off of this.
Ryan had too much
You know what?
seat.
I'll be honest with you. I thought that the
I am
person
definitely
who
dying.
He ate the other half of the
Cat
cheesecake that we didn't eat.
was the gold holder, but apparently
GG!
Oh,
GG.
for
BattleCat
now-
says that he gets to keep the record on this one.
Apparently,
For now,
unless y'all want one
not.
more.
Cat,
I'm out.
I don't mind another one.
Okay, one more. This is it. This is it. This
Uno
is
más.
it. I know I said the last one was
Uno
it, but
más.
this is it.
Uno
Uno
más.
más.
And then the next one's gonna be it. And then the next one.
I mean, don't push me.
Don't push me
To
to
the
the
edge.
'cause, yeah.
I'm going to try to.
Dun, dun, dun. Where am I at? There we go. See,
Never
look.
mind.
Isn't that cool?
It's so cool looking.
Maybe.
That's a cool marble. That's awesome.
That's the one you're showing earlier on. That's quite cool.
Yeah. All right, 1 minute, guys. 1 minute. You
Anyway.
leveled up to level 3.
Fuck your incredible marble.
Rain
I'm coming first.
is still fiery. Dreams is still dreaming.
As you do.
Shane is still white marble. BattleCat has a KimonoKat skin. Woohoo! Come on, cat. Oh, what do you got now, Grant? Grant is being corny again. He's
He
tofu.
paid for that.
He's
He
Chinese
fucking paid for
food.
that.
Chinese
He paid for that.
food, but he's corn and he knows
He paid for
magic.
that.
So there's magic. Magic,
That
scary.
man has a lot of time
Tofu.
invested in this game.
Okay. And then that one, there you go.
See, I like that. I like the
Desi!
call, but with
Desi makes
the-
it into the
the
last
kind of
race,
thundercloud
guys. Watch this.
tipping around
Desi
it.
is going to beat the world record. Either that or it's going to be Boatman with his Lamborghini.
Just so be-
Lamborghini.
Lamborghini.
Oh, we got Dusty
It's
in on
so
this
kind of
one.
Yeah, so that Dusty made it into the last race of the day. Welcome, Dusty. Welcome, Dusty. Good luck. We're breaking world records.
Trying to.
Rain
anyway.
broke it, then BattleCat, and now we're gonna see who. We're trying to break world records. Trying to get a new record break. Oh, see, I think if you
This
hit
is the
green,
fucking-
it goes
this is about
faster, and
the-
red
this
makes
is
you
the-
slower.
this is
I'm
the
not
fourth
sure.
time round, by the way.
Oh,
time
it
we'll
might be
play this game.
Shocky. Shocky is clearing the
Fuck
floor.
off.
This weird shaped marble.
Yeah, his marble's wobbling though. I don't know if he can
Where do you
keep
fucking high
maintain
level? He
speed
doesn't
with that
deserve
wobble.
to
Oh,
have
he didn't
the-
let Steve show him
Oh, yeah,
any
yep,
business.
Yep,
Oh,
he's
not with
fucking
that one
gone.
either.
Nope, not that one either. He's like, I ain't dealing with any Steves today, no matter their shape or form.
Uh-oh, he got slowed down there.
He got slowed down even though it was green.
Look at me and Boatman. Me and Boatman are trying.
Also, I put catch Pokemon.
We're trying.
Boatman and Rain are catching up to you. You better get faster if you want to beat that world record.
Not a fucking chance.
Nope, too slow, man. Too slow. You only got 22 seconds.
4, 3,
You gotta deal with these elevators.
19,
Oh,
18,
Rain
17,
coming in, trying to
16,
reclaim her
15,
record.
Oh, I
13,
think Shocky's
12,
Shocky's
11,
stealing it.
10, 9, 8,
I don't know, he's got
7,
5
6,
seconds.
5,
Oh!
4, 3, 2,
He claimed
1.
the world record. That was close. That was close.
Shocky took it by 4
GG,
seconds.
GG. Good job, guys. Good job. What fun.
Hold on just a minute. Hold on.
So we broke
Let me
3
have my-
world records tonight on this track because it was lots of fun because it's a newer track. Congratulations to each of you that did that. Lady, BattleCat,
I was
Shocky. It was so much fun.
Can I just add?
All right,
not
there
by
it
any
is. World
specific amount,
record.
Not just by any specific
Ta-da!
amount. By fucking 4 seconds.
So now we have to keep in mind which
Oh,
one
two
this
people
one
caught
is.
the Pokemon too. Grant and Kat.
You cheated on that one.
Shocky got 92 points for that too.
Dang.
That's pretty good points.
Dang.
Next time we might do this. We might pick one of these small tracks and just play it over and over and over and see if we can keep beating the record. And because that was kind of fun, and then you get more points that way faster too.
I like when
that was fun.
I like when we're on
my
the
marbles not as quick as it used to
on the
be.
world record kind of spectrum, and then it's like,
Also,
fuck, I
do
want to beat.
you see where BattleCat is on there? Do you see him? He's not far from you, and you're 9,000. BattleCat's 9,471. He gets in every single race.
What?
Whenever you are alive.
I was like 7,000 something.
I was gonna say I'm at 18,233. I failed to get into
and you
every
guys
single
look
race.
at this though.
Mine's like
BattleCat came in 8th place, and he was the world record holder. That means all the people above BattleCat actually beat the world record this round.
Hey, look, do you know what I'm at?
That means 7 of us were faster.
12,580.
Or does it mean? Maybe it does.
No,
Maybe it does.
because he had it at 149.
That's right. I'm reading. I'm thinking wrong.
Me, Shocky, and Boatman.
Yeah. But y'all just definitely weren't letting BattleCat have it. That's what it was.
Again.
Poor BattleCat.
Obviously, it's been.
He defended his reign though for an extra lap, for sure.
I always thought
or
the
2.
lower you were, the better you were. I mean, like, I'm at fucking 12,000, blah blah blah.
But yeah. Good job, guys. Good job. Thank you for being here. Thank you for hanging out. We're going to prepare ourselves for a raid. We're going to raid another person playing marbles tonight. So if you could hang around and help me out, that would mean so much. So cat raid and any emotes you like. Thank you, Shane. But yeah, cat raid. And then I'm going to use cat emotes. But if you have emotes, if you're not subbed, use whatever you wish. If you're subbed, you can use mine. But, there we go. I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to do.
Oh, and the Twitch recap dropped too.
Let's see. Yeah. 1, 2. Go over here and here. And go grab the person that I want to raid real quick. Alright, this is who we're gonna raid. So jump over to that stream, say hi in advance if you can. We're gonna share some love. So raid. There we go. So it's going, it's gone. But yeah, thank you. And thank you, special guest Lady Ray. Thank you for being here. We have to get her off the stage before she turns into a pumpkin. So I will catch you guys next time. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, though. It's so good to see you. I might be live again Sunday. Not 100% sure yet. Depends on how I feel. I got a busy packed weekend ahead of me because this person might be here. So, so I will see you guys. We're going to blame it on her. I might turn into a pumpkin before Sunday.
Yes.
But yes. Good night, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Peace.